a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's our playoff preview. We are in depth on the Jets and the Golden Knights all morning long. We'll also touch on all the other series. It is by far the best time of the year with this being a playoff season. Good morning to my two colleagues, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. Gentlemen,
good morning.
You both on this Saturday morning. Apologies for the late start, folks. We are, say that again, Ezzy, a hair past a freckle. Is that what the expression you taught me this morning
Hair
was?
Past a freckle, yeah. I'm surprised that you've never heard that. I feel like that's something that, like it's a joke, like an elementary school type of joke, right? Where because you're not wearing a watch, you say hair past a freckle. So let's see if the chat's heard of that one. I thought that was like a very common, saying, but maybe
Dave,
not.
Dave, are you familiar with hair past the
I feel
freckle?
like, if someone looks at I think as he's right, you're in your kid, you don't wear a watch and you go, oh yeah, if someone asks you the time, you say it's a hair past the freckle. I've heard that before.
I mean, it makes sense. I've never heard it. I've never used it. I might start to steal it.
Well, Drew, back in the 1950s when you were growing up, they didn't really use that expression.
Pocket watches is what we had. We didn't actually have wrist watches.
Yeah, monocles, and when you took a rickshaw to school, that's why
right.
it was
exactly. Yeah, and I didn't have air conditioning back then. I just had somebody fanning me with a giant block of ice behind me at all times when I got a little warm. There you go.
Still, the best moment in TSN 1290 history was when someone called in specifically to ask if Drew was really old to Remus, and Remus didn't really know how to answer. That was the funniest thing ever. Obviously, Drew is only 1 year older than me, but he's got an 80-year-old soul.
And for the record, James Robinson's grandmother said that all the time, Ezzy. So there you go.
There you go. At least as he's in tune with the grandmother.
Although Spency says he can't recall that from his playground days.
In any event, we will continue on the hair past the
well, Rob Somerville got you, Drew. He said you used a sundial.
That's true. How old is Drew? He's so old he used a sundial. Yeah, exactly. The rest of the show brought to you by our friends at Rumors, of course. Nonetheless, let's get into it, gentlemen. It's playoff time. It's the playoff preview show.
Playoffs?
It's a great day.
Playoffs?
Playoffs.
Is that still a thing, guys? I can go, into what's up if you want to do that, but I mean, whatever.
No, I think we're okay in the using the playoffs meme. I used it yesterday on the show preview tweet because you just have to use it. I mean, whether you're
it's timeless. Like it is timeless. That's never going to get old. It's always going to be funny.
It is never going to be. Oh, Kenny's waterball thinks his grandmother thinks I'm cute. That's nice, Kenny. I appreciate that.
Have her eyes checked, Kenny.
I'm taken, but I'm flattered nonetheless.
Who's the sexiest man in Winnipeg amongst grandmas?
Hey,
I have very limited vision.
That's why we get along, because I have my limited vision, they have their limited vision. Nobody's able to drive at night. It's a great time for everybody. Just daytime dates. That's all we're going on.
Is this a hockey show?
I'm not even sure anymore. Speaking of daytime dates, we now of course know that the Jets Golden Knights Game 3 is going to be a daytime affair here in downtown Winnipeg next Saturday, 3:00 puck drop in the afternoon. Let's get into this.
Which means there's going to be a lot of hungover people by 7:00.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be like Wine Fest. You ever see when the early shift for Wine Fest, where people are just stumbling out of the convention center? It's like 5
like zombies.
Yeah, they're purple tongues. The people are wearing. The women are carrying their high heels at this point in time because they're not able to walk in them anymore. It's just an ugly scene all around. That might be what downtown Winnipeg looks like next Saturday afternoon.
Well, guys, we got a bold prediction by Jay Miller.
What's that?
He says the Jets are going to win by a hair past the freckle.
Okay, well, there you
I like
go.
It. I agree with Jay. We're going to get into it here, but I think this is going to be a very close series. And if you read Jesse Granger's article in The Athletic, shout out to Jesse, who we've had on the show many times before.
Yeah,
you break down all the stats. I mean, there's the big advantage is obviously in net with Connor Hellebuck, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be picking 4 or 5 games. Like I have this series going to at least 6 games for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be that one-sided 4 or 5, and we'll get into it and we'll do our predictions throughout the course of the show, of course. But, from my perspective, had this series, let's say the Jets sneak into the playoffs and they sneak in not so much by virtue of their own solid play, but the fact that they had built up that significant lead, and Nashville and Calgary just run out of time. And some could argue that that could have been the case, but the Jets did finish the regular season very strong. I mean,
7-3.
You know, that's a, you know, the winning the 5 out of the 6 before Thursday's game, which obviously was meaningless. To me, right now, this team is playing with a swagger, and that's a positive thing, that they haven't had for a lot of the second half of the season. Now, swagger's only going to get you so far. You know, you obviously still need.
You can't teach grace.
Thank you.
You either have it or you don't, Drew.
Thank you for the Seinfeld reference there. But I think the fact that this team is now playing with another degree of confidence, and they seem to that last homestand seems to maybe have settled them down, and it wasn't as big of a struggle as it had been for so long, especially since after the All-Star break. That I think that's going to certainly benefit this team going into this matchup with the Golden Knights, because if you look at it on paper, or you strictly just look at it in the standings, it looks like it's more one-sided than I truly think it actually is going to be, Ezzy.
You're 100% right. This is not, if you just look strictly at the standings, right? And we should mention this was Vegas's highest point total since joining the league in 2017, 2018 with 111, right? So there's a 16-point difference. So you're saying, okay, well, that's, 8 wins or whatever combination of wins and overtime shootout losses, right? So you're saying, okay, first place team versus the second wild card team. Vegas is the big favorite here. But, I mentioned Jesse Granger's article, which I'm sure we're going to mention a few times. We'll mention Murat's article as well, because we're going to have him on in about 50 minutes. But I mean, if you just look at whether it's offensive metrics, defensive metrics, goaltending, defense, I mean, these teams are very similar, kind of middle of the pack, right? Like most of the rankings in terms of goals for, goals against, expected goals for, expected goals against, they're kind of in between like 10th and 16th in the NHL, right? So, I mean, really the big advantage, I think, is for Vegas is probably their forward depth on the bottom 2 lines. And obviously Mark Stone, we'll get into Mark Stone, who obviously hasn't played since January, but it is announced that he is going to be available to the Golden Knights for this series. And Mark Stone is obviously, a huge factor. I think if Stone isn't healthy, Dave, I think the Jets are the favorite. I think he's that impactful, right? Like he's maybe top 5 best two-way forward in the league, right? Great offensive player, but we know how good he is, at turnovers, and he's just a great defensive forward, right? Yeah. So I think the advantage, going into the series, if there is one, is for Vegas, but it's very, very minimal, I would say. I think this is a coin flip series. I really think, the Jets are going to win at least a game in Winnipeg. Let's be honest. I mean, that whiteout crowd is going to give them a huge advantage. So I really see the first 4 games being splits. I think the Jets, are going to win one of the games in Vegas. Obviously, if you win game number 1, you have a huge advantage in the series because now the other team's chasing. But I think this series is going to be very even, Dave. And, Laurent Brossoit, even though he's not the guy that we expected to be the starting goalie, he hasn't lost a game in regulation. So there's a lot of good, intriguing storylines, in addition to the fact that this is a rematch of the 2018 West Final.
The storylines are immense. This isn't 2 teams that just sort of get matched up in the first round of the playoffs that aren't altogether familiar with one another. It's sort of like the Colorado-Seattle matchup. That's sort of more of a random matchup between 2 teams without a lot of history, of course, Seattle being the second year in the league. But Dave M., you look at this matchup and the storylines galore, the ties between Winnipeg and the Golden Knights organization, the history, because, with the exception of, say, Jack Eichel and Pierre-Luc Dubois, a lot of the cores are similar to what were in the Western Conference Final a number of years ago. So I don't think for a second that it won't take long, I don't think, for any lingering bad blood to quickly develop between these 2 teams who haven't really seen each other in a number of months. But I still think that it's not going to take long for that rivalry to be heavily renewed between these 2.
No, absolutely not. But I do agree with what Ezzy said in that assessment. This doesn't seem like an 8 versus 1. This seems like a 4 versus 5 matchup. And I think that's, that speaks to the Jets squandering their opportunity, because I think they're a better team than their record necessarily indicates, even though we often say your record is who you are. But I think that going back to when Rick Bowness made these line changes, the line changes work. Right now, these lines are working. The Jets' advanced stats, if you look at them, they are working in their favor. They're like the metrics are all, towards the Jets. And in the last 15 games between Jets and Vegas, it's like identical. They're like mirror images. That's why I say, to me, this is more of a 4 versus a 5 than it is a 1 versus an 8. And so, and then if you go with that toss up, how much of an impact can Mark Stone have? I know he was skating again, and I know that, as he just said, he's going to be available, and we know how good Mark Stone is when he's healthy and when he's been playing all season long. But I mean, to get going, to get your first game of the playoffs, your first game of the season, in a long time in the playoffs, that's not going to be an easy task. So, I do wonder how much of an impact that's going to have on Mark Stone, how much of an impact, Mark Stone can have on this series. Because I agree with Ezzy. If he's healthy, he's a complete difference maker. I mean, he just completely dominates he completely dominates from what he's capable of doing. And then you throw in the Jack Eichel factor. Amazing to think that this is Jack Eichel's first crack at playoffs, but obviously spent so many years in Buffalo not making the playoffs. So I do really think it's going to be fascinating. I think the Lowry line is going to be exceptionally important for this Jets team in terms of shutting down Eichel and company and getting those matchups. And I think that ultimately the other thing that is remarkable to me is the fact that you want to laud this Vegas team. They've had 5 different goaltenders and they've still finished with as the most points in the Western Conference. Like that's a testament to they've got a very strong defensive core. And
it's like Carolina style, right? We always talk about how Carolina never needs to spend a lot of money on their goaltenders, right? Like it was Alex Nedeljkovic a year ago or 2 years ago, and obviously it's Freddie Anderson now, Antti Ranta. Like the Hurricanes are a great example, Dave, of when you have really good team defense in front of you. It doesn't matter, how good I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but you don't have to have like a top 5 goalie in net for you, right?
Well, it's certainly, if you're
sorry, Dave, I was trying to go back to you there, but I just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, if you're going to go inexpensive in goal, you better have a damn good defense in front. Unless that goalie is, of course, on a rookie contract. But to your point, Dave, about Mark Stone, hasn't played since January 12th. That was the last time he played just under 4 minutes in the game against the Florida Panthers. Well, that's January to February, February to March, March to April. That's 3 months of being out of game action. So to expect him to step in and be the same impactful Mark Stone as he would be, in the course of a regular season where he's playing every second night is probably it would probably be a little bit foolish. That said, no matter what percentage of Mark Stone you're getting, he does impact the series. He is going to make the Vegas Golden Knights a better team in this playoff series. But you're both right with a lot of your points. You look strictly at the points gained in the course of the regular season and the disparity there. The Golden Knights have a ton more, 16 more than the Jets. I look at regulation wins. That's the number that I'm looking at, because a regulation win means that you're beating your opponent, in the first 60 minutes of the game, when the game is largely played at 5-on-5, even strength, of course, penalties. But
just to quickly jump on, there's no 3-on-3 overtime in playoffs.
No, there is not.
So you're right, Drew. It's a deceptive number when you say, unless you're looking at those regulation wins.
Right. So I'm just strictly looking at regulation wins. The Golden Knights have 38 regulation wins. Well, the Jets have 36. The Jets were a team that was pretty good in regulation in terms of getting their wins. We know that if the
Jets didn't like overtime, it's pretty obvious. They wanted to end the games after 60 minutes.
Well, I mean, that's a fair point. They certainly didn't like losing in overtime.
They were like what, 7-1?
Yeah, exactly. They a lot of their when they won, they often won in regulation. When they lost, they often lost in regulation.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So, but
you can basically, you're making a good point here. I mean, it's true. Like if you look at it just shows you how much closer the Golden Knights and the Jets are, right? And if the Jets have, let's say, 99 or 100 points, and the Golden Knights have, let's say, 107 and 108, then we're saying, oh, okay, well, they're a little bit closer than 16-point difference. So really, you can just throw the points out the window, right? 4 years ago, the Blue Jackets upset the Lightning. Was that 3 years ago or 4 years ago? I forget. I think it was 2019. The Blue Jackets swept the Lightning. So, I mean, what did that point disparity mean, right? Like, really, you start from scratch. The playoffs is a whole new animal. We talk about it every year. There's going to be an upset. I mean, I don't think Florida's upsetting Boston. Don't put me in that category, because I think the Bruins are going to handle the Panthers. I think the Panthers might win a game or two, boys, but I'm just saying, like, upsets happen every year. To Dave's point, whether it's a 3 versus 6 seed, 1 versus 8, And we should also mention here with the goaltending for those, who might not be aware, Logan Thompson was the number one goalie for the Golden Knights. He was having a good year. So it was Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill. And then, Laurent Brossoit was the third string goalie. And then obviously Jonathan Quick was expired. So right now,
for a lot
of don't forget about Michael Hutchinson.
He was with the Henderson Silver Knights, Brossoit. And so Brossoit right now is the starter, but we should mention that Logan Thompson could be available in this series. So, I mean, they do have the option, but right now it's
also still have Jonathan Quick there. Jonathan Quick.
Yeah, he's the backup now. He's been the backup. I just wanted to mention that for those who didn't have the most recent update, that Logan Thompson could be an option right now, but it looks like Laurent Brossoit is the guy.
Well, he's been
at least for the first few games of the series.
Well, he's been on, as long as the Golden Knights are winning, he's going to be their goalie. He's been on the probably the best streak of his career, as of late. I don't think he's lost in regulation in his last.
He's 7-0-3 or maybe.
That's right, something like that. Just really playing the best hockey of his career at a very optimal time. But again, this is a guy who wouldn't have had any playoff experience to speak of. Certainly, no significant playoff experience, and it's. No matter how well he's playing, it's still an advantage to the Winnipeg Jets, obviously, with Connor Hellebuyck in that. But the goaltending situation in Vegas is one of those really interesting ones. Because, look, if Connor Hellebuyck has an off day or gives up a bad goal or whatever, it's not like there's a debate that they're going to go with David Riddick. In Vegas, if Laurent Brossoit struggles or has an off day or has a bad start to the series or runs into a bit of a slump at any point, there's going to be a fair bit of a conversation because of the number of options that they also have behind him. And it's not like anyone is saying Laurent Brossoit, he seized the job over the last 10 days and 10 games for the Golden Knights, but I don't think he's got a stranglehold on that job for perpetuity, like a guy like Connor Hellebuyck does.
No, and that's the biggest difference, right, guys? Like Hellebuyck is coming into the playoffs on a heater. Like we all know, the .930 save percentage, all the wins. He was a big reason why the Jets got into the playoffs, right? I just checked Hockey DB. Brossoit's only got one game of playoff experience with the Oilers because, of course, that's who he started his NHL career with. But that honestly could have been like, he could have just come in for a period. I don't think he even started that game. I'd have to go back and check. But regardless if it's half of a game or one game, that's not a lot of playoff experience. When you're talking about Connor Hellebuyck, he's had many years of playoff experience, including that 2018 run. So the huge advantage in net is with the Jets. Nobody is going to dispute that. And right. I do think that the X factor is Mark Stone, right? Like I don't think he's going to score a hat trick in game one. If he has a big impact in this series, it's going to be later in the series because, as Drew mentioned, or I'm not sure, Dave, if you mentioned it earlier, he hasn't played since January, right? So that's 3 months there, roughly, that you're talking about that he hasn't played, right? All of these other players, are in the middle of the season, if you want to call it that, or they've been playing meaningful hockey for the last several weeks, right? So that's going to be a huge factor, I think. And we'll get in. I know Drew wants to get into some of the matchups and the line combinations and everything like that, but the Jack Eichel, Jonathan Marchessault, like Marchessault obviously had the big goal against the Jets earlier in the season. I think that was in December. He had the winning goal. He's been a bit of a Jets killer, but you go down the lineup, our show, Drew and I often talk about how much we like Chandler Stevenson, Riley Smith. Like this is a good Golden Knights team, but when you have Scheifele, Connor, and Dubois playing the way they are, I think the Jets have the advantage if you go top line versus top line. It's I think when you get into the depth lines that you might give the Golden Knights a little bit of an advantage, but you've got Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton playing at a very high level right now. So I really think the forwards are a bit of a wash. I really think the only advantage I would give the Golden Knights is their back end. I like their group of defensemen is stronger than the Jets.
Well, that's what makes this series so fascinating is that it is much closer than it appears when you strictly look at standings. I was talking to Ken Belke, who covers the Golden Knights for Sinbin. Sinbin Vegas is his website, and we were talking about the matchup and everything else, and how you look at it strictly on paper, and the Golden Knights seem to have an advantage. And then we were looking at expected goals for. The Golden Knights are sort of an anomaly. their expected goals for is actually lower than the Winnipeg Jets. Their expected goals for percentage. The Jets are 13th at 51.62%, sort of where we would expect them, a middle of the pack team with a middle of the pack expected goals for percentage. Meanwhile, the Golden Knights are actually lower, 50.87. So the Golden Knights have dramatically outscored their expected goals for this year. And so, does that, eventually, does that, not luck, but, do the numbers eventually catch up to them? When does that happen? If it happens?
But you know what? Sorry. And you're right, Drew. I mean, the numbers are numbers, facts are facts, but I always take those with a grain of salt. I know you do as well, but like, we're talking about a difference of like 0.2,
sure, it's a small
0.3,
difference,
right? And that's what my whole point is. I'm going to play spoiler here. I'm picking the Jets, and not just because we're a Winnipeg-based show. I'm picking the Jets, but mainly because I think, to your point about expected goals for, expected goals against, the fact that neither of these teams have a very good power play and aren't teams that take a lot of penalties. Like Drew always talks about even strength offense. This series will be most likely determined at even strength, right? Like, I mean, there's going to be power plays and power play goals and everything like that. But I think the difference between these teams at even strength is minimal. And I give the Jets the advantage because mainly of Connor Hellebuck. I really do.
Well, I mean, Connor Hellebuck, of course, is a huge difference maker. This Golden Knights team, though, Dave, and I think you were nodding along with me, they're not a great possession team. The Jets are a better possession team at 5-on-5 during the regular season. The Jets were, 51.57%. That puts them 11th in the NHL. Golden Knights were in the bottom of the league, bottom third of the league, just over 48.1%. So it's not a great possession Golden Knights team, which is sort of an interesting part of this series, because usually the Jets aren't the great possession team, but they're actually better than the Golden Knights have been during the regular season so far this year at 5-on-5.
No, and again, it's more about what have you done for me lately? I mean, we talked about like people talking about how David Rittich was good early in the year, and I kind of went off. Last game I said, well, who cares what you've done, in January and in November, and that's why I throw out the games against the Golden Knights for the most part, because I mean, even though the Jets were playing well at those times, and the 2 of the 3 games were 1-goal games, but still, like, those teams haven't played in 3 months.
Right.
And if you compared the Jets in, mid-February to March, you don't necessarily like that Jets club going up against Vegas. You look at this Jets club right now, and I've talked about it before, and I've said this, and I've discussed this before. You don't have to be firing on all cylinders to win a Stanley Cup in order, to the last 10 games of the season. But the Jets needed to be, the way you started the show saying, if the Jets would have just, or maybe you didn't start the show this way, but because we were doing a little bit of a nonsense scene, but like if the Jets had just simply gotten in by luck, in the sense that they had already built up enough of a standings bank that they could say, okay, the runways run out on Nashville, Calgary, we're in, but we weren't playing well. And so therefore we'll hope Connor Hellebuck will be Hellebuckian, and we won't, that's how we'll be able to handle the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Well, now, as I was saying earlier, you've got a team that is firing on all cylinders. You've got lines that are working. All these combinations seem to be working. And of course, there's still the question as to whether Nick Ehlers is going to be 100% healthy and Kevin Stenlund is going to be 100% healthy. And we know the Jets are practicing today at 12 noon. It's their first playoff practice. So anyway, so we'll see what happens there in terms of who gets on the ice and who doesn't, and whether Rick Bowness gives us any sort of insight afterwards. But and we know can
I interrupt you for a second?
Sure, of
course.
Course.
Ehlers isn't on the ice, that's a huge factor in this series.
Oh no, it'll be maintenance.
Well, I mean, they'll say it's, of course, you'll never believe, you won't get the true story, of course, because that's what happens at this time.
That was the point
year.
I was making.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that's the point you're making. But if Ehlers is not on the ice, because we know that he has suffered an upper body injury on that dirty hit by Ryan Hartman, then this entire series takes on a completely different look. And
they're actually going to have Ehlers skating at a secret location. Like, he's going to be skating at like Varsity View Sportsplex or something, or they're going to have him at like Eric Coy Arena so nobody can see him. But you're absolutely right, Drew. I mean, if he's not on the ice today, that's not a good sign. I'm not going to say red flag. It's not a red flag, but if he's not on the ice when the Jets practice in Vegas, because I don't know this, but I assume the Jets are going to be there by Monday at the latest, right? Like, I don't think
I would assume that they'll practice today and tomorrow, and then
Here.
fly out
Well, hey,
after
with the shenanigans Vegas did last year, they may be better off in 2018. They may be better off being in Winnipeg, practicing here and
But
putting off
their
their time going to Vegas.
I mean, obviously,
Dave's referring to the Golden Knights staff turning the lights off before the
and not
Jets
putting the
practice
nets out
again, and not putting the nets out.
Pretty funny
nonsense like that becomes
two can play that game, right? The Jets can do that to the Golden Knights if they really want to. I don't think they'll do that, but yeah, I think you want to see him on the ice today. But you definitely, if he's not on the ice on Monday when the team practices ahead of game one, then that would be a red flag and indicate that most likely he's not going to play. But yeah, I mean, Ehlers is playing probably the best hockey of the season now, so that's a big one. And Kevin Stenlund isn't insignificant either, to Dave's point, right? Like he's been good on the penalty kill. We know that he can play center and wing. He combined with Axel Jonsson-Fjällby for a goal against Colorado, right? So Stenlund's been a useful player, but obviously Ehlers is the big one. So hopefully he'll be ready to go for game one.
Well, that's just exactly what the Winnipeg. They need to be at full strength. We know that Cole Perfetti is still wearing the red non-contact jersey, and the expectation would be that you wouldn't see him at least to start the series. But it's amazing how quickly, come playoff time, some of those non-contact jerseys can be shed for regular colored jerseys. But let's take him on face value that he's not going to be ready at least to start the series. But Ehlers, because this is the Jets, I think, best forward depth that we've seen all season, where they actually,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Where they seem to have three lines that have been able to contribute, especially with Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton now contributing a little bit offensively as of late as well. So all of a sudden, if you're going, 9 forwards deep with offense, which has been such a problem for this Jets team for so long, it definitely changes the complexion of how you have to match up.
Because Ehlers most likely, Drew, if Ehlers isn't ready to go, I think you guys would agree, the logical player to move up is Nino Niederreiter, and then Morgan Barron goes on the third line, which shows you that how much better the depth for the Jets is at forward now that Chevy acquired Niederreiter and Nemesnikov, right? Because before you didn't really you were bumping up Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, no offense to him, or you were bumping up whoever you want to pick here. Carson Kuhlman to the third line or somebody like that, right? Yeah. So now Niederreiter, can contribute on that second line with Nemesnikov and Wheeler if that, sticks together as the second line, which I imagine it will. That's another thing, guys, to talk about here. At what point, if at any point, are we going to see Mark Scheifele up the middle, right? Because I think you guys would agree that Mark Scheifele on the wing with Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois has worked out well. But, this is the playoffs now, and matchups are so important. And Jack Eichel, Chandler Stevenson, they have a good 1-2 punch up the middle.
Right now, and then we're going to go to break.
William Karlsson is the other center. So Chandler Stevenson has actually been centering the third line at times.
Right. But right now, the way that line for the Jets has been playing, I think that they're going to roll with it. I don't see any change happening.
I think so too. Yeah.
Especially because Dave, and you mentioned it, the success that top line for the Jets, that's been how they've been having. You look at again at 5-on-5, the Jets top line, Connor, Dubois, Scheifele outscored their opponents 8-3. Second line, Ehlers, Nemesnikov, Wheeler, 7-0. They've outscored their opponents in the last sort of handful of games since this experiment started. Since this tweak began. Even Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton, 6-1, they're outscoring the opponent. And in the fourth line, playing everyone to a draw. The Jets have been controlling the play over the last 7 or 8 games. Now, does that carry over to the playoffs? Would some of those teams say yes, but we weren't necessarily, we were maybe took our foot a bit off the gas in some of those games? Well, I don't know. The Jets have been playing pretty well, and they don't need to worry about that. They need to worry about what they can control, and what they can control is that their forwards have been playing some pretty good hockey over the last couple of weeks. Much more to come.
Steve, by the way, got to address that comment from Steve. What's funny about that comment, I'm not sure if Steve was thinking this as well, but who was the goalie for LA in 2012? Jonathan Quick, obviously, right? So pretty funny. But yeah, I think, just because the Jets are a wild card team, going back to what we were saying kind of 20 minutes ago or whatever, you can really throw the points out the door. This is going to be a very even series. Yeah. And I don't think many people, are going to be picking this to end in 5 games or anything like that. I think you're going to see a nice long series, and that's what you want to see.
There's only one dominant team in the Western Conference, as far as I'm concerned, and that's the Edmonton Oilers. Not in Seattle, but they've been a good hockey team. The Edmonton Oilers are the only dominant team right now in the Western Conference.
They have to be the favorite, don't they?
They are. There's no question about it. I looked at it earlier this week with our friends at Betway, and I know we're not going to get into a betting segment because that's not necessarily what we do. But the odds that I got on the Oilers to win the Western Conference, I was surprised at how high they were, and I was glad to jump on that because
I have a question.
Yeah,
is Spency the producer of our show now?
Is he telling us that we have to go to break? Is that it? Is that what Spency's telling us?
Spency wants us to go to break here, guys. So let's listen.
Well, we don't want Murph sitting for 20 minutes. I mean, come on.
I don't want Spency to fire me,
though, Dave.
Oh, right. I forgot. So then why are we going to break for them?
Well, you got to take a break. You have to pay some bills, as Spency's reminding you. In any event, much more on the Jets and the Golden Knights. We'll look at some of the forward matchups. Who gets the Eichel matchup? Pierre-Luc Dubois. We know how good he's been as a shutdown center before. How does he factor in? Much more to come. We're all about the Jets and the Golden Knights. Don't go anywhere. Saturday morning, we're live with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on this Saturday morning. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. I was going to call you Ezra Ginsburg for some reason.
You can call me Ezra Ginsburg. That's fine.
We've just met each other recently. We don't have a long-term history.
Well, so you remember the best misspelling of my name was when we were in first year university and we played intramural hockey at Max Bell Arena / Wayne Fleming Arena. I'm not sure if it was Wayne Fleming back then, but it's now Wayne Fleming. So we're going to call it that at the Max Bell Center. And I wasn't a student at U of M. I was a University of Winnipeg student, a proud Westman.
I was an interloper.
I was like Van Ginsburg. I was in university for like 11 years, but I went to University of Winnipeg, where my dad taught math for 32 years. Shout out to you, Dad, if you're watching right now.
He taught a great deal of number of students, except for his own son. His own son couldn't quite grasp the math.
I tried to take linear algebra from my dad, but he's like, "Get out of my office." But shout out to my dad. I think he was.
How'd you get this phone number?
Yeah, the most handsome man to ever walk the stairs of the University of Winnipeg. But Where was I going with this? I completely lost my train of thought
Your
here.
name, something about your name at when we were playing.
It's the worst misspelling of Ginsburg.
Sorry, guys, I needed some more brain cells there.
I was only half listening. I still remember.
Yeah, they spelled my name Ezra Ginsburg. So I thought that was pretty funny that, I don't know where that came from, but yeah, so a couple of guys like our buddy Dan Goldstein always calls me Dan Ezra Ginsburg. So
I used to get mail from the Assiniboine Downs when I was a kid, and it was addressed to David Manuel, which sounded like manure. So I thought it kind of made sense.
Manuel, or kind of like Minute Bowl.
Yeah. Between Manuel in the top right and Ginsburg in the bottom middle, I think I'll stick with my name, Drew Mindell. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Remind you folks that, of course, Tuesday night after the Jets and the Golden Knights, it is going to be the Illegal Curve post-game show. So be sure to lock it here onto our YouTube channel.
Only place you want to be, right here with the three of us.
When the game ends, we begin talking about the Jets and the Golden Knights, game number 1 on Tuesday night. And again, on Thursday night, we'll be here throughout the entirety of the Winnipeg Jets run in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
It's going to be late nights again, boys. It's going to be like it was in that Jets-Oilers series.
Yeah, it was going to be the only difference except for that Saturday afternoon game. But you're absolutely right.
The Saturday afternoon game. That's always fun.
It'll be an
afternoon playoff games are different. Regular season afternoon games, okay, take it or leave it. But I always love a nice playoff afternoon game on a Saturday. I mean, it's going to be perfect for us, right? We're going to be previewing the game next Saturday.
There you go. And of course, the Illegal Curve Overtime Pool returns courtesy of our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. So anytime a game goes into overtime, send us who you think is going to score the overtime winner. If you pick the overtime winner correctly, you may be entered, or you will be entered to win a prize courtesy of our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. We run that contest through our Twitter feed at Illegal Curve, so be sure that you're keep it locked there as well.
And it's one player. Dave's pointing the IC logo. The ICOT pool, you pick one player. Drew always gets upset because usually there's going to be an overtime first night. That's always the best. I think we'd all agree when you get an overtime on the first night of the playoffs, but it's only one player total. You don't pick one player from each team. That's the Bucci Gross overtime challenge. A lot of people pick one player from each team, but we only do one player. We keep it real.
And you avoid whatever Weeb is doing because Kenny likes to try and
Kenny has his cool
stuff.
too.
Yeah, he's been trying to horn in on our little our contest, which we've been doing for years.
Yes, exactly.
I have the notes to prove it.
That's right. So we're gonna have to break Kenny's legs.
I've got the notes to prove it, and Kenneth has the toques to prove it.
Kenny's already in Vegas, by the way. I'm not sure if you guys knew that. He went right from Colorado to Vegas.
Yes, he
must be nice.
Yeah. So he went to a show last night. I saw on Instagram. Ken went to check out some sort of show last night on the Strip. I'm not sure. I think it was maybe.
Would you call it a strip show?
No, I would call it maybe a Cirque show on the Strip. I don't think that he went to see a strip show. But
first and only time I went to a Cirque show, I fell asleep.
Really?
Yeah, they're boring.
Dave M hates. That's what Dave M's all about. He's fueled
I saw
by
an Elvis impersonator in Vegas. Or sorry, not Elvis. That was in Mexico. Or I don't even know if I've ever seen an Elvis impersonator. No, that
was just some guy who lured you into his
Michael
his
Jackson
house.
is what we saw in Mexico. I saw a Frank Sinatra impersonator in Vegas. It was very good. Very well done.
Thank you for that.
Very lifelike.
Thank you for but you saw. I'll tell you where you saw an Elvis impersonator, dingus. You saw an Elvis impersonator
on my bachelor party.
Bachelor party in Brainerd, Minnesota.
That's right. Drew, I drank so much beer that I don't remember any of that bachelor party. And speaking of Dan Goldstein, he fell asleep on the toilet during that bachelor party. So that was a good one.
And they're both married with children, folks. So we got that going with Horace. Let's look into the matchups a little bit as we've completely derailed ourselves like we usually do. The matchups so Jack Eichel is obviously the biggest name on the Golden Knights in terms of their offense. He's the one who's leads
and he will be healthy for game one because he missed some time towards the end of the year.
Right, but he's healthy for game one. He leads the team in points this year, just under a point a game. He had 67 games played, 66 points. So everyone knows how dangerous Jack Eichel is. Is that Adam Lowry's matchup as much as Rick Bowness can get it?
I think so.
100%.
Okay, so you guys are. I was going to say,
and obviously first change you don't.
Of taking on some of those difficult matchups.
I'm sorry. Do you want Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor playing defense against top line of Vegas? Absolutely not.
Well, to Drew's point, though, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois has the ability to be that shutdown center, right? And I think you probably will see that at times, like especially as we mentioned with last change not being there for the first couple of games, right? But yeah, Drew, I think absolutely you want the Lowry Appleton Niederreiter line, or if Niederreiter does get moved up because of Ehlers' injury. We're just not sure right now. Regardless, it'll be Lowry and Appleton, we know, as a pair on that third line with either, Niederreiter or Barron. I think we'd all agree Morgan Barron fits in there seamlessly because he's played there before, right, Dave? But
Right.
yeah, absolutely. Lowry, and speaking of the Jets, playing well towards the end of the season, the last 7 or 8 games or 9 games of the season, I mean, Lowry is right up there. I mean, how many fans were saying, put the C on Adam Lowry based on what he was doing. So yeah, that's the matchup you would like. And to be honest with you, the only line that really, I think you would say it would be a pretty big mismatch is Nemesnikov and Wheeler, and if it's Ehlers or Niederreiter, right? Just because of the obvious.
Yeah. For conversation's sake, let's assume the lines stay as the Jets want them to stay.
Yeah. So you most likely, if you're Rick Bowness, you'll try to get that matchup at 5-on-5. And the second line we talked about, that's William Karlsson, Riley Smith, Mike Amadio. But I haven't watched the Golden Knights. I'd have to ask Jesse Granger about this, but Chandler Stevenson has played third line center, but Chandler Stevenson, before Jack Eichel arrived, was the number 1 center for the Golden Knights. So the Golden Knights are pretty solid up the middle. But I really don't think there's a big advantage for either team. Like if you look at the Jets' depth and their line combinations against the Golden Knights, I really think it's a wash.
Well, I mean, the Jets, as how they've been playing lately, and now that they've sort of solidified these lines, I would agree with that, Ezzy. They've been playing some very good hockey. This move of Mark Scheifele to the wing, which left so many people sort of furrowing their brow, Dave, and wondering about its success rate, has proven thus far to be successful. Now, it's not a big sample size yet. It's still been, what has it been? Has it been 10 games? I don't think it's been quite 10 games yet.
Thereabouts.
But it has seemed to have worked. Mark Scheifele, and I was talking about this earlier. I did an interview in Vegas yesterday, and I was saying Mark Scheifele.
Whoa! Drew doing interviews in Vegas. Look at you, Mr. Vegas, Drew.
Wow!
You guys done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that Mark Scheifele, for a guy who had disappeared for so long, and really, after the Carolina benching and then the sort of the back and forth and that terrible West Coast road trip, he just seemed like he was missing. Well, he looks like he's no longer missing, and he looks like he's playing again with some confidence. And if all of a sudden Mark Scheifele is playing with confidence and not being a detriment or as significant a detriment on the defensive side of things, if those responsibilities have largely been alleviated from him with Pierre-Luc Dubois up the middle, well, that is just a huge boost to the Winnipeg Jets, because I think I see a Mark Scheifele that's playing almost more free and playing with less weight on his shoulders because of the removal of that defensive responsibility.
Let's be honest. The decision by Rick Bowness and the coaching staff to move Scheifele to the wing to play with Dubois and Connor has been a brilliant move to date, right? Like, let's just be honest. It has worked perfectly at the right time, as Drew mentioned, right? Like, however many games it's let's call it 8 games or 9 games or 10, whatever number you want to pick. It's 2-3 weeks that line has been together, right? At the end of the regular season. And going back to what we were talking about the Jack Eichel line, obviously he centers the first line, going back to Mark Stone, right? Like, who I don't know if we know for sure if he's going to be playing game 1, but I think they've said that he could be an option, but you guys might know better than I would. But
he's been skating with the team and everything else. And
let's say that he plays game 1, or it doesn't even matter for the purposes of this. Like, let's say he plays game 2. Like, I don't necessarily know. He's a right winger, so I don't know if he necessarily starts on the top line, Dave. But that does tip the scales, in my opinion, a little bit in the Golden Knights' favor to have a guy like Mark Stone, who at the very least is going to be on your top 9, right? Like, Mark Stone's not going to be a fourth line guy. I would imagine he probably starts on the second line or third line, because as we talked about, Jonathan Marchessault is your first line winger with that Russian kid, Dorofeyev. I don't know a lot about him. But I think he's only played a part of the season, right? So he's been on that top line too. But so with Mark Stone, again, I'm not saying that I'm still picking the Jets boys, but I'm just saying, I'll throw back to you, Drew. But if Mark Stone is an impact in the series, it's obviously going to be much tougher for the Jets to win, and it'll be a longer series. But it's really tough to say how big of an impact Stone is going to have because he hasn't played in 3 months.
Yeah, well, look, and it's going to take him some time to get back into game shape and get his legs under him, and he won't be the same forceful Mark Stone that we're used to seeing, come, during the regular season. There's no question about that. We saw how long it took Nikolai Ehlers to just get back
Exactly.
up. And that was with his sports hernia injury. And, in my experience, and Ezzy, you can speak to this way better than the rest of us, a bad back is not something that you can easily recover from.
Yeah.
Again, you're not quite, Mark Stone's.
Well, no, I'm glad that you're comparing me to Mark Stone. I mean, a 40-year-old, washed up 250-pound guy who doesn't play in the NHL versus one of the best right wingers in the NHL. So thank you for that, Drew. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look at Mark Stone is an unbelievable player. I mean, that's why, True North / the Jets wanted to acquire him, 3 or 4 years ago, right? Like, he's an excellent player. Think about what he's done for Canada at the World Hockey Championship, right? Like, this guy is a player. He's a really good player. One of the best players from Winnipeg probably ever, to be honest with you, when all's said and done. You look at his junior career with Brand and everything like that, right? But yeah, it's going to take him a while. I think if he scores a hat trick, I don't know I wouldn't say I'd be shocked, but I would be pretty surprised if Mark Stone just steps right back into the lineup, Dave, and he's dangling and dominating, because you expect there to be a little bit of growing pains to start off. Not growing pains, just, just a little bit of rust. Rust is a better way to explain it, not growing pains.
Well, and as Stu Smith here makes a good point. He says, be careful. Kucherov sat out a whole season and led Tampa in scoring in the playoffs. And I'm going to use the word shenanigans, right? Like, you never know with guys saying, oh, well, I'm going to be back a week earlier, but maybe we'll just keep this going, even though I know the cap after March is no longer in effect. So I don't think that in this instance, they're really doing anything. Of course, I haven't looked at the cap situation in Vegas, so I don't know if Stone would have put them over had they.
Sure, there's shenanigans going on there.
That's what I mean. So I'm sure. So, so my point is that at the end of the day, this is there's a possibility. There's always a possibility, but it is a bit of a disadvantage for him early in the season, or early in the games. That's why it's so important for the Jets to get going. And I was reading an article by. Maybe it was in Murat's article this morning about the idea of when teams score first, how important this first goal is, both for Vegas and Winnipeg. And it really has been critical for these teams this season. So we'll see. Not that they don't have the ability to come back, because they do, but generally speaking, when they score first, they've done well. And I just think that, as we've talked about, like this series is going to be such a fascinating matchup. And yeah, you're going to want the Lowry, Niederreiter, and Appleton line. And boy, how good has Mason Appleton been for that line right now? We he was kind of seen as like a not superfluous, but like almost like he's there, but people didn't understand why he was there. What is Rick Bowness seeing him? Well, he whatever he saw, it seems to have found its mark, because he's been playing a lot better in the last little bit, as has the entire team, obviously, and that's the reason why they've had the success they've had over the last 10 games. And yeah, you're going to need it, because again, even though this is to me a toss-up series, you still have to be firing on all cylinders the way you were in order to have success the way you want against this Vegas team.
Let's look at it from the Jets forwards perspective. So when, games 3 and 4, of course, they get last change. So they get the opportunity to set their matchups like they want them. So from your perspective, who does Rick Bowness want to deploy, let's say Connor, Scheifele, and Dubois against from the Vegas perspective? I mean, obviously the fourth line, breaking news there, but let's assume that that's not going to be.
Segment over.
Yeah, thank you. Good segment. We're going to break right now. Let's assume that that's not realistically going to happen on a regular basis. Do you see that with the Jets having any sort of any specific advantage when it comes to a forward matchup when you look at the Vegas forward lines that they could be going against?
Well, again,
Mark Stone.
Well, no, but I mean,
it depends on Mark Stone.
I haven't watched enough Vegas lately, because, as Dave mentioned, the Jets and the Golden Knights haven't played since December, right? Is what you mentioned, Dave.
Yeah.
So I mean, I haven't been watching enough of the Golden Knights. Like, I know that. I mean, obviously, Jack Eichel missed some games, but like right now, if you go to Daily Faceoff, our friends Frank Saravalli and Mike McKenna at Daily Faceoff, who always have the most updated lines, but it's based on the previous game, which I think it was against Seattle, a win over Seattle, right? Mm-hmm. I should know that it was only a couple nights ago, but right now they've got Chandler Stevenson centering the third line, but I know that Chandler Stevenson has also centered the second line at times this year. And then William Karlsson's also a guy that can play on the wing. And then you throw in Mark Stone. So it's hard to know. I mean, look at right now, I mean, you would say that the matchup that you would want for the Dubois, Scheifele, Connor line is against the Golden Knights third line, because Karlsson, Riley Smith, and Michael Amadio, that's a good second line. Carlson's a good defensive forward. I mean, obviously, Carlson and Riley Smith have played years together, Dave, like going back to the 2017-18 season. But yeah, I mean, you obviously, you want to get you want to get the Dubois line against the weaker of those three lines, which is obviously the third line. But like this series, I think is going to be very even. But yeah, I mean, obviously with Phil Kessel there, I mean, Ivan Barbashev is a good player, though. I mean, that was going to be an option for the Jets possibly, right? To acquire him. We were talking about Barbashev. I know Weber, for example, thought Barbashev would be a really good fit. So I really think that if there is an advantage, like again, I'm getting away from what you were asking about here, Drew, but like if there's an advantage in the top 9, you find it for me, because I think you could easily give the advantage to the Jets, Dave, when it comes to the top 9 forwards. But again, does Mark Stone swing the favor, for Vegas?
I would say, sorry, Dave, that that the Golden Knights probably have more depth scoring on their third and fourth lines, and I know that Lowry and Appleton and Niederreiter have been playing well as of late. But when you look at the third line of Barbashev and Stevenson, because Stevenson is the second leading scorer on the Golden Knights,
right? That's what I'm saying. Usually, he's in the top 6, right? So if Chandler Stevenson is your third line center, then I mean that's very impressive.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think that that's an area where the Golden Knights might have an advantage in their forward lines is their ability to get scoring from their bottom 6 and things of that nature over the Winnipeg Jets, especially because the Jets' fourth line really doesn't contribute much offensively at all. But other than that, I mean it is a very, very tight matchup when you look at the forward groups.
No, there's no question about it. I mean, and it's amazing considering the disparity in terms of points between these two clubs that you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, it's not the huge advantage that it could have been. And again, as he's 100% right. I mean, if Vegas has a healthy Mark Stone, first of all, how many more points would they have had this season? But it also goes to the idea of how much of a difference maker we think he could be when he's 100% healthy in a series. I mean, all of us, look, there's a reason why the Jets coveted Mark Stone and Vegas coveted Mark Stone. And we were all around watching and covering, that the sweepstakes that were Mark Stone. And I'll never forget, because I can't tell you how many Moose games I was at, and Pierre Dorian is strolling around. Kevin Cheveldayoff is strolling, and Kelly McCrimmon is always right around there. Like that
was the Mark Stone courting period.
No, but it was amazing. Like, honestly, it would be like, there's Kelly, there's Pierre, there's Kevin, there's Kelly. Like, they were always, and there was always that dance.
What they were saying the whole time was, there's Dave, there's Dave, there's Dave, there's Dave.
They're like, does Minuk ever leave this place? It's like, no, I don't. I've got a little room right over there.
The Dave Minuk triangle.
Yeah, exactly. I do. I have a separate YouTube channel where I do like squatting videos inside Canada Life Center. So it's quite fascinating.
I actually think that would be a pretty good idea. I think we could monetize that, Dave. I think we should talk after the show.
The squatter does squats.
Yeah. Like Drew, it's not like literal squats.
Oh, I thought you were doing exercises while squatting.
Squatting. But you watch. There's guys who do YouTube things where they're like, "Hey, I'm going to stay under a bridge, or I'm going to stay under here." You need to get out more, Drew.
You don't know squat, Drew.
Apparently, I need to spend more time on YouTube.
Well, obviously,
all I do on YouTube is broadcast. I don't necessarily watch, but I guess
all I do is watch. YouTube's the best.
You actually are the inspiration for Dude Perfect. That's what I understood.
It is true. That is true. I was the original dude.
There you go. It's a good.
Drew, you haven't watched Blippi on YouTube? Like, Ruben's all about that. He wants Blippi on all the time.
I haven't yet, thankfully, and I hope never to at this point in time. Maybe when I have grandkids, if Blippi's still around, because my kids have aged out of Blippi. Let's look at the defense. We haven't really talked a lot about the defense.
Let's do that, Grandpa.
To me, this is an area that the Golden Knights have the advantage. Is on the back end. I would say
the right side. Like, just let me go right now. Like Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, Nick Hague. Obviously, I was joking, Drew, but yeah, I mean the right side.
Me being a grandfather, thank you.
Yeah, no, and I mean Alec Martinez, who even though he's a little bit older, he's on the top pair with Alex Pietrangelo and Braden McNabb. Like, your top 4 of Martinez, Pietrangelo, Theodore, and McNabb is one of the better top 4s, and that's how quiet of a 54-point season for Pietrangelo, right? In a year in which Carlson had, I don't know if he finished with 100 or 101, whatever he finished with. And then Morrissey, obviously, with his big offensive season, right? 54 points, Dave, used to be an amazing year for a defenseman. Now it's kind of like, middle of the pack.
What have you done for me lately?
Exactly. So, I mean, Pietrangelo, McNabb, Shea Theodore, Alec Martinez. It's a big group. It's a mobile group. Mentioned Nick Hague. We should mention Zach Whitecloud from Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation here in Manitoba. It's a good group of defensemen, and they definitely have the edge. I wouldn't say it's like head and shoulders or leaps and bounds. But this Golden Knights back end, Dave, they can produce offensively. So it's definitely something to watch in the series. And the Jets are always going to have to be, that's the thing. They like to activate their D. I know it's a cliche, but they do.
Well, and you know what, as the one guy who I'm watching right now, because it's the ones that you would not expect, because you expect Josh Morrissey to be Josh Morrissey, expect Dylan DeMello to be that steady horse that he has been. Neil Pionk has really become rejuvenated again. And Weber, I believe it was Weber, asked Rick Bowness about it a couple of days ago or last week about, or maybe it was, I don't remember. Maybe it might not have been Weber. It might have been Hamilton now that I think about it. Or Scott. Actually, sorry, it was Scott Billick. I'll go through every member of the media, but it was actually Scott. Sorry, it was Scott, because I was there, I should know. But it was Scott who asked. And because he really is playing different. And remember, guys, it was Neil Pionk when the Jets beat Connor McDavid and the Oilers. Mm-hmm. Neil Pionk was a critical piece for the Winnipeg Jets defense. He was really a linchpin for that defensive group and limiting what Connor McDavid did and allowing the Jets to sweep the Oilers. And let me tell you, every Jets fan, every time you just get a chance to say the Jets swept the Oilers, it just brings joy if you grew up in the 1980s. So anyway,
that was my best Harner Ryan sing impression.
There you go. That was,
wow.
Harner Ryan. I thought you were having a stroke, so I was looking.
Harner Ryan has nothing to worry about.
No, he doesn't.
I was had 9-1 already dialed because like, oh God, something's happening to Ginsburg. But anyways, or Ginsboil, whatever they were calling you these days.
Ginsbung.
But
I'll never forget Ehlers scoring that goal, and the only person in the crowd being Bud Light Seltzy.
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget that. And then Seltzy gets up and he's cheering. Like everything
like
about that, everything about the bubble playoffs was just so bizarre.
That wasn't the bubble playoffs though. That was the.
He means the COVID. Yeah.
The bubble playoffs were as equally as weird, but yes.
Sure, you're right. It wasn't, but it was no fans. Is what I meant.
No fans. Yeah.
Anyways, the point is that to me, Neil Pionk playing the way he is, Brendan Dillon playing the way he is. I mean, Dillon obviously a critical piece for keeping the front of the net, keeping those guys honest. But Neil Pionk, I think, if he's back to playing the level that Jets fans expected from Neil Pionk, because for a long time this season, that wasn't it. And look, there's always situations. I mean, it's interesting because Rick Bowness is fairly honest. So he said both that there was an injury situation that he was obviously dealing with at some point this season, and also that he wasn't playing well. And Rick said, I talked to Neil and he knows he's receptive. And it seems like whether it's the injury or whether it's the, understanding of what he needed to do to get better, to me, if Neil Pionk can get back up to the level that Jets fans have come to, expect of him, that evens things out a little bit more from a defensive core that, as he's right, you would give the edge to the Las Vegas Golden Knights.
It'll be a fascinating series. We talk more about it after these commercials with our good friend Murat Atesh from The Athletic. Don't go anywhere. The comprehensive series preview of the Jets and Golden Knights continues on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit Rolly's.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. Saturday morning, Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Going to be joined by Murat Atesh of The Athletic coming up momentarily as he'll look into Murat's whereabouts. As we
No, I'm not. Murat's going to be on. I don't have to look into any whereabouts. I'm just curious to know if you've been stubbing him around Crescentwood these days.
I haven't seen him. At least I don't think I've seen him. I mean, I never intended to snub him in the first place, but I'm completely oblivious.
That's the problem, Drew, that you walk around like you own the neighborhood, so you don't even see anybody because you're just looking over everybody. That's the problem.
Truth is, I'm just lost in my own mind. I'm usually walking my dog or something, and I'm just sort of
I'm just bugging you. I mean, that was
my way around the neighborhood.
It was just a joke, Drew.
Oh,
I know you don't snub people. I snub people.
I snub you, but that's, I mean, I think I'm justified.
You've been snubbing me for 14 years, though, so I'm used to it.
No, I think that's a justifiable decision on my part. I would never actually go out of my way to snub as somebody as nice and as generous with their time as Murat. So I do feel, of course, eternally guilty about that. And he was right for calling me out in that instance. But in any event, no, I have not seen him as of late, as far as I know. And I hope that I'm not wrong when I say that. The Jets and the Golden Knights Tuesday night. I know people are asking about a watch party, or not a watch party, a live broadcast, a live broadcast of the Illegal Curve post-game show. We are working on it. We're working on it. It's in motion. We're trying to figure the details out. So as soon as we know anything, we will let you good folks know. I promise. Keep it locked onto our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The website will have all the latest as well. So stay tuned. It's something that we're working on to try and make the live broadcast of the Illegal Curve.
Breaking news. Murat just texted me. I forgot to send him the link. So I'm usually the guy that sends the guest the links. Yeah. I did send Eric Duhatchik the link, so Eric's got it, but I just sent it to Murat. So obviously he can't join the show unless he has the link. Yeah. So I'm sorry, boys. He'll be joining momentarily.
We'll let Ezzy work on that. So it's a good thing I suggested to Ezzy it's a good thing I suggested to Ezzy that he look into Murat's whereabouts. But Ezzy's the one who's snubbing him right now, not me, for the record. This is going to be a fascinating series. I really think that, the storylines, even off the ice, the ties, the Winnipeg-based ties between these organizations are going to add an extra element. These are two first-year head coaches in their respective cities. So, Bruce Cassidy, of course, has never.
I remember what he said about the Jets last year.
Yes, exactly. When he was a coach of the Boston Bruins, he said that, basically the Jets are an easy team to play against in terms of getting to the center of the ice, which is something
bulletin board material right there, Drew.
It really was last year. It was not a false statement by any stretch.
Did the Jets were a lot of good last year?
Well, I mean, the Jets last year were a disaster, of course. And a lot of what Rick Bowness has been preaching from the start of this year is make it more difficult to get to the center of the ice. And now that Ezzy has successfully sent him the link, and fingers crossed the audio works, Murat Atesh of The Athletic joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. 2 thumbs up. Now, Murat, the inquiring minds want to know, because I think I haven't snubbed you as of late, but am I wrong? Have you walked past me and I've ignored you and I haven't been aware of it?
You know what? I can say I am aware of 0 snubs, Drew Mindell, neither from you nor your dog. I have been said hello to by every member of Illegal Curve who I have clocked in my vicinity in recent days, and this just makes me so excited to be here.
There you go. Thank you.
Our hellos per 60 are fantastic right now.
Yes, our hellos.
Our links per 60, not so much.
Yeah, no, that's where we're struggling. You're falling behind in your links per 60 there. Murat, good morning. Obviously brought you on to talk about what's going to be a fascinating playoff series between the Winnipeg Jets and the Vegas Golden Knights. And we talked about it through the first hour of the show. You referenced it in your great article previewing the series on theathletic.com, that you look strictly at the placement in the standings and it seems one-sided, but you go one layer deeper and it's not nearly as one-sided as it may appear between these two teams.
100%. Yeah. Winnipeg, the Jets are the underdogs. I'm not going to try to say that they're heavy favorites or anything to that effect at all. Mm-hmm. But you look at regulation wins, which will have a little bit more meaning. You know, they're within 2. That's close. Yeah. When you look at the 5-on-5 metrics in terms of expected goals and shot attempts and all of that sort of stuff, Winnipeg did a lot better than you might expect, or if you haven't checked, and they're kind of in the range with Vegas. I know Vegas had plenty of injuries throughout the season, and that may hamper things as well, but so did Winnipeg. We remember the first half of the season in Jets land, and I think everybody's going to be talking about this. The ultimate X factor in any goal or in any playoff series, there's a spoiler, is goaltending. And Connor Hellebuck should be an advantage against anybody Vegas can dress. I know it's LB, I think, is the presumed starter for game 1. Mm-hmm. And despite his, I think it's a 927 this year, some phenomenal numbers in a small sample for Vegas, you have to believe in the guy that taught him, the guy that brought him up. And it's not that Connor Hellebuck deserves credit for Laurent Brossois' success. Brossois deserves that, but Connor Hellebuck's an advantage in any series. And that's before you get into the systems, the X's and O's, Bruce Cassidy changing some things up in Vegas. They're not your younger selves Golden Knights from the 2018 playoffs. There's some differences, and I think Winnipeg matches up pretty well against them.
I would agree with that. And Murat, obviously, we have to talk about Mark Stone. And I mentioned, and you would know better because obviously you've been covering this more in depth, and I'm not sure if it's a guarantee Mark Stone is even going to play in game 1, but he's certainly going to be an option in game 1. But what type of impact do you think he'll have in the series, especially early on in the series, because we expect it to be a longer series, right? I'd be curious to know who you're picking. I'll give you a little bit of a chance to think about that. No, I'm sure that you've already probably made up your mind. Maybe you haven't. But what type of impact do you think Mark Stone can have early on in the series, considering he hasn't played since January?
Well, yeah, Vegas is kind of in that boat for a lot of guys, right? Like Shea Theodore recently back, Jack Eichel recently back, but Mark Stone, long absence, painful situation. And last I heard, he's skating in a non-contact jersey with Vegas. And so is he a guarantee for game 1? I honestly don't know. I don't think so. And so I can really only speak to Mark Stone, the healthy player, because he's darn near perfect. As a winger at 5-on-5, he's a darn near perfect.
Analytics darling, right?
Absolutely. And that's kind of what caught my eye several years ago, is that, who is this guy that shows up in the numbers? But then and I did this back when he was available at trade deadlines and Winnipeg could be interested in all that sort of stuff. You do the video deep dive on the way Mark Stone plays hockey. He's a perfect forechecker, takes perfect lines. His stick is amazing in terms of knocking pucks down in the neutral zone. He supports his teammates. He covers defense back down low. If he's F1 back in his own zone, he's as good as any center in my mind. I mean, he can just do so much that doesn't always show up on the highlight reels, but that helps the team play in the right end of the ice. Oh, and he puts up points in a lot of situations. So he's a phenomenal player, and I know he's had a tough go of it with injuries and everything like that of late. So what version of Mark Stone would Vegas get if they got him back? That's, I think, the biggest question mark. But if he's healthy enough to go, whatever playoff magic energy that these guys get, I mean, that's a dangerous weapon for Vegas. Not necessarily in terms of him coming over and taking over the series, but every shift that he's on the ice for is that much harder because he plays such a close to perfect version of hockey on the ice.
Murat, when we talked about the Jets, probably in our preseason show, we talked about the center depth. Dubois, Scheifele, Lowry, insert generic fourth name line there. But of course, Mark Scheifele now is a winger. And he has been for the last 7 games, and it's been about 2 weeks. It was the end of March in that game against the Red Wings when he moved over to the wing. Not a massive sample size, but from your assessment over the last couple of weeks, how have you liked that, and do you see that sticking for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think Rick Bowness has found lines that work. And for a guy that was guilty of maybe over tinkering from time to time earlier on in Winnipeg's season, he's run with them and he's kept them together and he's leaned on them to great success. I really like the lines as Winnipeg has aligned at present. I think that with Scheifele playing sort of a winger's role, and he'll take strong side faceoffs. So when he's on the right side, he takes draws and stuff like that. And Rick Bowness is quick to remind us. But realistically, in Winnipeg's own zone, more often than not, it's Pierre-Luc Dubois playing down low, supporting the defenseman. And that is an advantage. Dubois is better at winning some of those down low battles. He's also a little bit more patient in terms of giving that down low puck support before turning up the ice than Scheifele is. And so what that gives you on that line is a little more stability in winning that puck in Winnipeg's own zone. And then you've noticed, like, Winnipeg has the green light to send its wingers flying into the neutral zone. That works if you have control, which Dubois helps with. And it's all the more dangerous when you have Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele chasing those stretches down and then trying to turn that into transition offense. I think that that's worked tremendously well. Connor and Scheifele have great offensive chemistry and they've connected. So I really like that line. And I think they're up to 8-3 in goals at 5-on-5 since being put together. That's phenomenal. They're doing it on positive shot metrics as well. Not quite 8-3 good, but still solid underlying numbers for them. You go down the lineup and it's more of the same. That Ehlers-Nemesnikov duo has chemistry. That Nemesnikov-Wheeler duo has chemistry. And you've got some nice passes from Ehlers to Wheeler for goals as well. They're also controlling the flow of play in terms of the underlying numbers and the scoreboard. And I guess I'll just, without turning this into a monologue about every single line, you cannot talk about Winnipeg's lineup right now without Adam Lowry's performance on that third line, whether it's standing up for his teammates, whether it's adding some timely offense, whether it's Nino Niederreiter and Mason Appleton doing the same. They found something there with that trio that obviously they wouldn't have had access to before the trade deadline, but they didn't have access to until Rick Bowness made that lineup switch heading into that Detroit game. And that's another line. They're in this high 60s in terms of percentage of the shots that they get, expected goals that they get. And they're also dominating in terms of the flow of play of goals, real, honest goals. And when Adam Lowry is scoring and checking and protecting the middle of the ice and getting to the middle of the ice, you know, that conversation about center depth gets real. He had that month where he disappeared offensively, and you're like, oh, okay, is he a fourth line center now? I don't know if you guys went through that sort of thoughts in your own mind, but he is back. He's been back for a while, and that line takes things over, and that is genuine depth that I think Winnipeg can count on.
Murat Atesh is our guest Saturday morning. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Murat, of course, is with The Athletic covering the Winnipeg Jets.
Murat, by the way, I don't have thoughts in my own mind. I just try to get into Drew's mind and try to just create chaos in there.
You're well done. Good job there.
Yes, a good thing.
The Last of Us. Ginsburg is the mushroom in my brain, unfortunately. Murat, you look at the defensive matchup between these two teams. To me, that's where the Golden Knights would seem to have the advantage, particularly on the right-hand side. That said, Neil Pionk, who was certainly the target of a lot of consternation throughout the course of the year for Jets fans, it seemed as though he's playing better hockey as of late. How do you look at the defensive matchups in this series and sort of see it playing out and where the advantage lies for each respective team?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, Vegas is more dynamic on defense. I don't think there's any way around that. And I know Theodore has recently returned to health, but add Alex Pietrangelo, their whole top four is dominant in terms of their underlying numbers, the goal numbers, everything like that. The interesting thing that you find is that Winnipeg's defense core outscored Vegas's on the year. More goals, more points. Part of that is Josh Morrissey having a better offensive season than absolutely anybody. And part of that is Winnipeg setting a target for more offense from its defense and actually getting it in terms of that weak side defenseman activating, following their breakouts up the ice, being a fourth attacker, and then attacking in the offensive zone as well. So there are reasons to like Winnipeg's defense, and I think that everybody trusts Josh Morrissey so much at this stage of the game, that top pair, that the conversation does become about Brendan Dillon and Neil Pionk. Neil Pionk struggled early on in the season defensively for sure. If you look at his His metrics on the season, they're not impressive. Absolutely, they're not. Even if you look at the Pionk and Dillon pairing, they've been scored on more often than Winnipeg has scored when Winnipeg's on the ice. That's not true for Vegas's top four, but Winnipeg's really important second pairing has been outscored this year. So that's an area of concern. And the big question is Pionk. And a couple of weeks ago, I think it would be very easy to say that, okay, he's not moving very well. He's not handling the puck very well. What's gone on in his year? And then he seemed to turn that around. And I've asked questions about his mobility. Is there an injury? Everything like that. Well, I think he's been moving a little bit better of late. And maybe along with that comes some confidence. And maybe that, turns into some of the offensive plays that he's made of late as well. So I think that, if there were some alarm bells on that pairing, there should have been. Now I think it's a gentle question mark. Can they handle the rigors of Vegas's offense? And they've shown recently, and give credit to Brendan Dillon for this as well. He's elevated his game down the stretch too, that they can handle, the challenge to get Winnipeg in. Now this is going to be another level altogether.
Murad, just kind of continuing on this idea of, that there isn't that much of an advantage, whether you look at forwards or defense. I mean, the big advantage we all agree is Connor Hellebuck or Lauren Brossoit. I mean, or Connor Hellebuck over, Aiden Hill, or obviously Aiden Hill's not going to be playing, but I should have mentioned Logan Thompson was the guy that I was thinking of, or Jonathan Quick. Any goalie that the Golden Knights are going to use is not playing at the same level as Connor Hellebuck. So isn't that even more reason to almost not just call this series a toss-up, because obviously that might be, oversimplifying it, but couldn't you even say, like, whichever top six or whichever top line is performing at a higher clip, that's going to be the team that eventually wins this series, right? So if that's, the Connor Scheifele Dubois line, or if that's the Eichel Marchessault Dorofiev line, or whoever else is on that line, again, you might know who would be on that top line more than I would. Obviously, Eichel's the number one center, and William Karlsson is on that second line with Riley Smith. But isn't that kind of a way you could look at this series as well? Just because there aren't that many advantages. Like you said, the Jets actually scored more goals from their back end than the Golden Knights. And you would probably think that, Theodore, Pietrangelo, all those guys, they would have more. But it just seems so even to me that it's really going to come down to really which top line is performing better.
I mean, I have time for that. I think Vegas was able to go through some real difficulties in terms of their stars being out and have other guys emerge. So Chandler Stevenson became a really dangerous player for the Golden Knights. Jack Eichel's return gives them the possibility of a truly dominant number one center, depending on what level he can get to as well. And then we know that Karlsson, Smith, and Marchessault line has given Winnipeg fits for ages. And if you think of the Golden Knights of yore, 2018, that is a reason Connor Hellebuck, I believe deep down inside Connor Hellebuck, there is an element, not of vengeance in an angry way, but of, everybody talked about Marc-Andre Fleury outplayed me in 2018. There's no doubt in my mind that Hellebuck has a driven chip on his shoulder for this particular series. But anyway, going back to that Smith, Karlsson, and Marchessault line, if they use them, we know for several years that the amount of back pressure that they can put on some very good Winnipeg Jets players is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And they're able to turn the flow of play against Jets players that, in my opinion, should be better than them at times. Now, there's another thing that Vegas does that makes me think that there's, is be sort of a systemic question. And Vegas switched to a zone defense this year. They're content to keep a whole bunch of guys in the middle of the ice, keep Winnipeg to the outside, and they're content to give up zone time as long as teams stay on the outside. Well, once upon a time, 2018, if we're going back that far for this storyline, there was a sort of narrative in Vegas that you can tire these guys out, that at some point that Scheifele, Wheeler, Connor line is going to take a shift that's too long and you're going to be able to counterattack on them and things like that. So there's going to be a lot of game within the game that, Scheifele, Dubois, and Connor, if they play the best version of their game, they can be the best first line in this series. But there are holes that we see with long shifts, with chasing an extra offensive opportunity, with whatever else that is as well. So, maybe that's just a long way of talking around the exact same thing that you said. But I think that there are reasons you could believe in either set of forwards heading into this series.
Now, Murat, we got to ask you about the power play, because the Jets' power play at one point, I feel like it was flirting with top 10 in the NHL, and now it is way down to the 23rd spot. And but it looks, the movement looked better the last few games. Is there anything that you've seen that would suggest that this power play is trending in the right direction ahead of the playoffs?
Well, yeah, and I think that it's about movement, and I think it's about movement with enough purpose that the defense moves. If you just pass the puck around the perimeter, the defense doesn't have to move. The seams don't open up. Nothing gets done. And I think that Winnipeg had gotten very, very slow for a little while there. Now, I don't know if that coincides with Brad Lauer's back situation, stepping away from the on-ice portion of his coaching or what have you, or if that's just something that Winnipeg went through all on its own, and maybe a bit of both. In the last couple of weeks, you've seen speed with purpose. And I think for me, a lot of that comes down to Nikolai Ehlers' impact attacking off that left point. When he attacks downhill, you see defenses freeze a little bit because he is a genuine shooting threat. So if he attacks downhill and sets up as if to move the puck, you see shot blockers go as if to block shots. And now you're seeing Ehlers pass around those defenders, whether it's to Scheifele down low, and then you get the slingshot pass into the middle, or he's been able to find Kyle Connor kind of across the seam a few times as well. And for me, those plays are always there, but they're only actually open if you attack with speed. And I think that Ehlers is a big part of that. You've also seen, Mark Scheifele take a couple of new roles, and his passing from behind the goal line at 5-on-5 is one of the best in the NHL. So why not bring it to the power play too? And he's done that. And so you're seeing Winnipeg with speed, and the speed creates options, and they've made some really good choices about where to move that puck to exploit those options. They're getting shooting and finishing as well. So it was a nice comeback to life for that group, to be sure.
Murat Atesh, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We remind you Tuesday night, the Illegal Curve post-game show immediately after Game 1 of the Jets Golden Knights series. Murat, in your article on The Athletic, and I recommend and reiterate to everyone that you should go read it because it's a great breakdown of the series, you talk about the Golden Knights and their 1-2-2 scheme. From the Golden Knights perspective.
Now we're getting into the good stuff. Murat, when Drew starts talking about your 1-2-2 writing in your article, you know that we're getting into the nitty-gritty here.
Here we go.
And despite Ezzy interrupting my train of thought there, are you expecting Vegas to be as aggressive with their 1-2-2 and maybe try and catch the Jets cheating to create offense, or do you think that Bruce Cassidy might explore more of a passive 1-2-2 to try and limit the Jets' speed through the neutral zone?
I think you're going to see both. And I think that that's the flexibility of that system that they use, where if they're aggressive with their 1-2-2, they're going to be looking to, the one is always going to be pressuring the puck carrier. But if they're going to be aggressive, they're going to think that, hey, we can beat their short outlet passes or anything going on down low. Or maybe there's enough chaos in the zone that justifies that. Winnipeg maybe doesn't have perfect control in a moment. So now you've got those two guys that can push up with a tremendous amount of aggression and try to create those turnovers very high up the ice and go for offense. But it's not, it's not that complex a read for those two guys to say, hey, Winnipeg has perfect control of it. They like to fly their wingers into the neutral zone. Let's not commit up ice because we're getting beat and there's space there as well, where they can make the adaptation to back up. And now you've got essentially four guys, between the blue line and red line or what have you. And that becomes a major change and a major challenge for Winnipeg to, okay, now can we beat that with speed? Do we have to chip and chase a little bit more? All that sort of stuff. So I think it will be on Vegas to sort of determine how well things are working, make reads on what they're getting and where the spaces are, if Winnipeg's moving the puck fast enough to exploit that aggression. So I think there's a little bit of give and take in that. And, Bruce Cassidy's a heck of a coach, and Vegas, there's a lot of experienced forwards on that team. You sort of believe that they'll be able to tweak that up and down depending on what they need. And the question is, can Winnipeg show the puck movement that it has for the last couple of weeks with its new lines to overcome that? And against some tough competition too, because I think Winnipeg, Nashville, Calgary, San Jose, Detroit, a lot of the teams they played down the stretch. I'm omitting New Jersey and Colorado deliberately because they're phenomenal.
You're just doing that because I'm a Devils fan, Murat. Come on.
I didn't know that. Well, hey.
I am a Devils fan, yeah.
Huh.
He'll tell you about it.
Shout out to Kenny Danico.
Yeah. One gem. I spoke to him at one point. Anyway, so I think that Winnipeg had some of its biggest success against opponents that won't be as good as Vegas is. And there's going to be a lot of cat and mouse in terms of getting that puck up the ice that I'm looking forward to see.
And Rod, we're going to ask you for your prediction if you're going to, be so generous and play along with us, because obviously, predictions are pretty hard this time of year. But, I wanted to ask you who you think could be a player for each team, both the Jets and the Golden Knights, who you think is flying under the radar that could potentially have a bigger impact in the series than you might think. We talked a lot about Adam Lowry, how well he's been playing. Like, a guy that immediately comes to mind for me, and I don't want to answer this for you, but like Mason Appleton, right? Scored the big goal against Minnesota, had a couple points in that win over the Sharks, right? So he's a guy that, could be, maybe play a bigger role than some people might think. But for you, like, who's and it doesn't necessarily have to be offensively, but who are maybe a player from each team? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, that you think, aside from the big names like Scheifele, Connor, Dubois, Eichel, Marchessault, Pietrangelo, who are a couple players that immediately pop into your mind?
I mean, I love the aside from the big names thing, because part of my answer was going to be, I don't think that Winnipeg knows how good Jack Eichel is. Like, I've seen some initial commentary that doesn't seem to rate him as one of the elite centers, and I think that's a mistake. But we'll leave that. We'll go deeper. And maybe I'll go back to Chandler Stevenson for the Vegas Golden Knights, who, as the season wore on and injuries impacted other players, I mean, he took a bigger role on the power play. He took some offensive situations, or he had success in offensive situations as well. And maybe he gets a little bit less attention than some of Vegas's more famous names. In Winnipeg, I think you almost have to avoid the top six if you're going to look for a potential impact player. I mean, Lowry for sure. I'm going to say maybe Nino Niederreiter in that regard, because if anybody can get to the middle of the ice against a dedicated zone that basically sits three guys in front of the net, Nino Niederreiter can do it. And he's such a fun player because he goes there, he instigates, he agitates. I don't know if Nino Niederreiter has an NHL fight to his resume, but and I think that makes people mad. I think that makes defenders angry. And you can see the ire that he draws from people at times. And I think that in a series where getting to the middle is going to be tough, I look to a guy like that who has a success and track record and a little bit of, piss and vinegar or what have you, just to get that done and do it in the most annoying way possible. So I'll go with Nino on that one.
Murat, there's a lot of questions. We don't know the status of Nikolai Ehlers. That's at 12 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get some sort of insight when the Jets hit the ice for practice. But of course, we may just end up with a couple of wool seeds from Rick Bowness, which will, of course, not tell us anything until they actually hit the ice for a game. But from your perspective, I mean, obviously that leaves a big potential hole once we see what happens with Nikolai Ehlers. Cole Perfetti, I mean, we know that he's getting closer and you're seeing him on the ice, still in a non-contact uniform. Do you think that there's a chance that he has an impact on this series, or is that completely dependent on obviously the situation if he's not ready for game 3, game 4, and obviously, like I said, depending on where the Jets are in that series?
I think there's a chance he has an impact, and I mean, I guess there's a chance that anything happens in the playoff series, to be real. But
chance I say hi to you.
There's a chance. I mean, some things have better odds than others, The thing for me is that I believe he's tracking well to make his recovery timeline, and to we've seen some positive signs with him on the ice. So I think that we'll get to a point where Cole Perfetti is an option, and then the question will be, how comfortable is Rick Bowness with that option? And we already saw before Perfetti's injury that in must-win situations, protecting leads, certain times of game, he'd shave Perfetti's minutes a little bit, especially on defensive zone draws and things like that. So as much as he was getting some offensive pop from him, there was a sense of, okay, we don't quite trust the rookie all of the way in these defensive situations yet. Some of that may be size, but whatever the reason was, you didn't see it. So I wonder if Rick Bowness, especially after speaking so cautiously about Perfetti's timeline, hesitates to put him straight back into the lineup. Let's say that Ehlers is healthy, which I expect that he will be, and will play a major role in the series. Well, then there's no obvious top 6 hole. And are you going to change up Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry, and Mason Appleton after what they've done for you of late? I'm not sure that you will. Then you go into the niche players. Kevin Stenlund, Bowness trusts him so much in faceoff situations. Another option on the right-hand side. Saku Maenalainen, a huge part of the penalty kill. And he talks about his size and effectiveness in that regard as well. Morgan Barron's created a lot with a little, and, maybe isn't as much of a specialist, but he PKs as well. So, if you're Rick Bowness and you like what you've done to get down to the stretch and you have any worry at all, and I already think he was cautious about using Perfetti earlier on in the season when Perfetti was having success, I think this big break might give him some pause in terms of how quickly he reinserts him into the lineup. I think it'll be more of a, we need some punch, something has happened, and now it's more of a hunch or a gamble than an automatic he gets right back in.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, because you look at the roster as currently constructed, and assuming everyone's healthy, there's no obvious spot for Perfetti to fit back in, because you'd be hesitant to break up the top six and the effectiveness that they've had as of late, and he doesn't really fit the role of a checking player or a shutdown defender on the Jets' third line. So that'll certainly be sort of a storyline to keep an eye on as the series unfolds and as Cole Perfetti returns to playing condition, if that happens in this first round. Murat, we promised that we would put you on the spot more than we've already done so, of course. So if you'd be so kind, if you're willing to do so, you're welcome to sit on the fence as well. Do you have a prediction that you want to, maybe let our audience in on as to how you see this series playing out?
Well, with a month to go, I thought Winnipeg was going to get rolled over by whoever that it faced as the top seed. And Vegas was no exception to that. Absolutely no exception. They were rolling. They'd gone through some injuries and they were having success. Vegas didn't dominate down the stretch. And I know injuries, we can talk about that, but there was some faltering there. And I've talked to some folks who watch them very closely who have wondered if they can maintain the level that they've hit at different stretches of the season. You look at some of those 5-on-5 numbers, you look at special teams where the only of the 2 power plays and 2 penalty kills involved in this series, only elite comes from the penalty kill on Winnipeg side, the only elite aspect. And I think that, okay, so that's close to a wash. 5-on-5, where probably most of the series is going to happen. Metrics-wise is pretty close as well. You got Connor Hellebuck in net. You have Winnipeg's relatively new success with that top 9. And for me, this is something that I've done before. You know what I'm doing here? I'm hedging at length. That's what I'm doing.
That's wonderful. You're a great politician. Talk around the question.
We're going to be like, okay, Murat, the show is now over, so no prediction.
Yeah, I'm just going to get the
Run
cane,
the clock
right?
out.
How many agains do I have to say? Can I Chevy speak my way through this?
Well, we are having a conversation right now, so
I guess that's well. Hey, you know what? I'll say this. I have more belief in Winnipeg than I have had in a long time. And I think that the maddening thing about the Winnipeg Jets for me has been the belief that I hold that they're better than that second half and capable of playing better than that. And you see that in their star players. You see nights where, oh my goodness, the back check, the fight, the block shot, the everything is there. They're willing to play through any amount of adversity and take the game over. And you see games where it doesn't feel that way. And so for me, there's always this question of who are the Jets? What level can they get to? When push comes to shove, will they be there? And I think by and large, they've answered the question, getting into the playoffs at all in this last stretch, that when push came to shove, you saw tremendous performances from their top 6, from their role players, from everybody up and down the lineup. And so this idea of they tease you with a higher level than what we saw in the second half. Well, hey, we saw a little bit more of that higher level. And it gives me more optimism about the Jets. I went to bed the other night convinced I was going to be covering 2 rounds of the playoffs. So, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. Winnipeg's an underdog, but they have every chance to win, and that's all I'll say.
Murat Atesh will have in-depth
I like that.
coverage.
We don't need a specific number. I mean, it's almost like that last Sopranos episode, right? Like you're leaving it open to interpretation, but I think really you're picking the Jets, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they can. And that's enough belief for me,
The game against Minnesota, Murat, I will say that game alone, even though I wasn't watching the full game and doing the post-game show, I seem to always miss the big games, including that 7-5 win over Edmonton a few months ago or a month and a half ago. But yeah, that game was like, after that game, you're thinking the Jets can beat anybody, right? So I think you're 100% right. The way the Jets finished the season was more emblematic of their team as opposed to the team who, struggled pretty badly for 30 or so games.
Or was it? And that's the mystery about these guys, right? Like, which version do you get? I like to think it's the 100% effort in all 3 zones, but we don't know until we see it. And Vegas is such a good team as well.
It'll be a fascinating series. Murat Atesh will have it covered in depth for The Athletic. Murat, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again real soon. Always appreciate your time and insight on this morning's edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
We'll see you in Crescentwood, Murat. I'll be the guy waving.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks so much.
There he goes, Murat Atesh this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. As I mentioned, when we come back, we'll give our prediction. Maybe we'll sit on the fence. Maybe we'll hedge our bets.
No, we don't sit on the fence. We do not sit on the fence.
I know. The only time
I already made my pick. Jets in 6.
Okay, well, there. Thank you, Ezra, for
spoiler alert.
I was going to say,
sorry, guys.
You couldn't just, I'm trying to build a tease to keep the audience engaged while we go to
Also,
commercial.
on the second episode of Succession, Billy gets divorced with Mary, and I have no idea what the characters' names are.
That was evident based on your inane ramblings right there. That was more than evident. Much more to come. More on the Jets and the Golden Knights. We'll look at all the series as well. Smash the like button. That's what Dave M is indicating there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
He was also doing the sign for a sandwich press. That's what Dave was doing too.
Oh, that also was. He was pressing a sandwich in his mind as well. Eric DeHatchick coming up at the bottom of the hour. That's right. It's a lengthier version of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Bonus time, baby.
We're going to go into overtime on this morning's edition. Don't go anywhere. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg are up next with more of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Great conversation so far this morning. Great conversation still to come. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We look forward to seeing everybody on Tuesday night for the Illegal Curve post-game show after the Golden Knights and the Jets. You know it'll be a late night, but that's all right. We're going to be up and rocking talking about Game 1 between these two teams. More information to come, of course, regarding an Illegal Curve live broadcast. We hope to give you that information just as soon as we can. In the meantime, though, be sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a minute of our live broadcasts here. Gentlemen,
And Drew, I just want to jump in on here because Leslie is going to Game 3. And I know I just had a buddy message me obviously demand is high for tickets because he is currently 1,921 in the queue to get tickets for the playoffs. So I guess the demand is showing that folks
I imagine it's been sold out already, though, right?
It just went on sale, Ezzy, about 40 minutes
no
ago.
40 minutes ago. So,
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's going to take long to sell out, is what I'm saying.
No,
yeah, you know what? I was unsure. Had they,
I didn't. I wasn't. I mean,
had they maybe gone, 2-3-1 in their last 6 games and sort of backed into the playoffs,
yeah,
then maybe I could see there being a little bit more hesitation. But
maybe
the fact that they actually played well down,
it will be a sellout.
But I'll tell you,
if there's ever been a Ginsburg guarantee, I mean, Winnipeg is going to pack that.
And nobody shows up.
Yeah,
no, but remember, you guys,
let's get 13,500 for Game 3.
But you got to remember, and I think this is one of the things: the fans have not been in the building, right, for playoffs in a long time,
except for BL Celtic.
Well, BL Celtic, and obviously there were some healthcare workers who got in during that time. But
including
I mean,
my sister-in-law,
including your sister-in-law. But I mean, I think that's one of those situations where the folks, like, the whiteout is what people live for, and that's what they're desperate for. And obviously the details, which are on a little site called illegalcurve.com, if people want to know, there's 2 different parties. There's the party in the plaza, which is going to be at True North Square, and then there's going to be the Winnipeg Whiteout Street Party, which is on Donald from Portage to Graham. And
and don't forget about the third party, which is obviously at Spency's Hot Tub in Sage Creek.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't actually think it's Spency's Hot Club because I've been to Spency's house, so I know Spency isn't actually in Sage Creek.
Hold on, you've been to Spency's house and I haven't?
Well, yeah, I had to deliver Spency's swag. Well, you had the option to come with me. You chose to not.
No, you never asked me.
You chose to parent instead.
Yeah, exactly. How irresponsible
of you, Ezra.
Yeah. I chose to use the magic eraser to get marker off the wall from Ruben writing on the wall. That's his new thing that he likes to do. He thinks it's funny.
I thought that was what you were doing. He was just following your lead.
He's like, Daddy does, I do.
Exactly. You can't blame the kid for following what Daddy does writing on.
As I was walking out the door to come over here to Dave's house, all Ruben kept saying was stinky bum bum, stinky bum bum. So he thinks that's really funny as well.
Well, that's, I assume, what he calls you on a regular basis is stinky bum bum.
And I should mention, 5 minutes prior to that, I was running around the house saying stinky bum bum, stinky bum bum. So that's where he got it from.
Reg Dunlop is telling us he just got in and all single game seats for Game 3.
There you go. So the fans.
That a boy, Reg. That's his real name, by the way.
By the way, Drew, you got a nice shout out from Mean Gene Oakland.
Hi, Mean Gene. Nice to see you. I always appreciate the shout outs from you. Look, and I think it's important that to note that the Jets' play down the stretch has renewed confidence in this team. Everybody
100%.
wants to look for the silver lining. Everyone wants to have reason to hope for them. And the fact that they've played well, and the fact that, as we talked about with Murat in depth, that the offensive numbers are positive. It isn't, look, Connor Hellebuck is obviously the linchpin to everything, but it's not like they've been getting caved in and solely relying on Connor Hellebuck for success. Yes, he's been a huge factor, as he always is, but the offense has been there. The forwards have been driving the play. And that's something that they should be able to do against the Golden Knights. As Murat touched on, the Golden Knights are happy to give up possession so long as the puck is kept to the outside of the ice. They're really good at suffocating the middle. And the Jets are, or have been, especially when they struggled this year, were a perimeter team. So it's going to be incumbent on the Winnipeg Jets to try and sort of defeat the Golden Knights at their own game. Vegas is going to say, we don't want to give up the middle of the ice, and the Jets need to find a way to still be victorious in the middle of the ice, because if everything's from the perimeter, then the Golden Knights will be able to strike fast in transition. And the comment that Murat said, which really sort of raised my eyebrows, about people underestimating Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel is a fantastic player in this league. He hasn't had any playoff success, obviously, because this is his first taste of the playoffs. But if you think for a second that Jack Eichel is not able to take over a game on his own, then you really haven't been watching him close enough.
Exactly.
No, he's the best forward in this series, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he's for sure the best offensive forward, right? And he's missed some time. I think, what did he miss? 10 games this year, something like that. 12 games. I'm not sure exactly.
It was about 15, if I'm not
mistaken. There you
mistaken.
go, 15. But he's always been a point per game player, right? That's like, it's just that he hasn't stayed healthy. That's always been the knock on Jack Eichel, including when the Golden Knights acquired him, right? Yeah. So you're 100% right. Like, if you're talking about offensive centers, he might even be as high as top 5, to be honest with you, Drew. He's very least a top 10 offensive center. I mean, now we could have the debate about, best all around centers, because obviously guys like Patrice Bergeron and Ryan O'Reilly, they would be higher up.
Ryan O'Reilly anymore, but
two-way, I'll take Ryan O'Reilly any day.
Well, but the best centers, obviously McDavid, Draisaitl. We know who the best centers are, but Eichel is not far from that level.
No, and the thing is, I think because of the injuries and because the Jets haven't played the Golden Knights since December, people haven't seen, Jets fans certainly haven't seen him as much unless you watch Golden Knights games. But going back to what we talked about with Murat, even if Mark Stone has an impact in the series, I really don't think there's a big advantage when you compare the Jets top 12 or the Golden Knights top 12 or top 9 or whatever you want to say, right? So really, if this is going to be a close series, and I wouldn't be surprised. And there's a lot of series, Dave, that I could see there being a couple of overtime games. This series, I do think, is going to go 6 or 7 games. I mentioned I'm picking the Jets in 6. But when you have a series that could go 7 games, obviously any team can win, right? And Hellebuck's goaltending is going to be a huge advantage for the Jets because he's playing at that same level that he was when he was winning the Vezina Trophy, right? He's for sure, in the conversation, I think, for the Vezina Trophy. I think Elliot Friedman already gave Hellebuck the Vezina Trophy for those last 13 games, but you're absolutely right.
I think he gave it to him for his interview with them.
Yeah, exactly. But Eichel is for sure going to be somebody who the Jets are going to have to shut down. So when you're talking about defensive pairings, obviously Morrissey and DeMello are most likely going to be tasks, or Dylan or Pionk are going to be tasked with that shutdown role. And same thing with the Lowry, Appleton, Niederreiter line, right? Especially at home. Rick Bowness is going to try to get that line up against the Eichel line, but there's a lot of other guys that can hurt you on the Golden Knights, right? Like even Phil Kessel's having a pretty good year, but Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, William Karlsson, Michael Amadio, he's had success against the Jets.
There's a reason they finished first overall.
Chandler Stevenson, exactly. So the Golden Knights are not going to be an easy out, but the Jets aren't going to be an easy out for the Golden Knights either. So I do think it's going to be super close, and it's going to be a fun series to watch because, as you talked about, Drew, this is going to be played at 5-on-5. And it could come down to like a bad turnover here, a bad turnover there. I think a lot of these games are going to be 1-goal games.
Well, it's worth noting that the Vegas Golden Knights are a front-running team. They're They have the second most goals for in the first period in the NHL. 87 goals for in the first period, trailing only the Edmonton Oilers. So when the Golden Knights get out to a lead, they're very difficult to rein in. They have 30 wins when they've led after the first period. So the Winnipeg Jets, that's a bit of not a concern for them, but something that they definitely have to be aware of is that the Vegas likes to start quickly, and when they're able to start quickly, they tend to have a great deal of success. That said, the Jets are a top 10 team in terms of goals against in the first period. So the Jets have been stingy when it comes to giving up goals in the first period. So that's sort of going to be the first 20 minutes are going to be a very interesting battle. And as Tikona Pauly here saying that the starts to this game are going to be a critical factor, no question about it. Because that's, sometimes if the Jets, who've been a bit of a slow starter at times during this regular season, if that continues over into the playoffs, Vegas might be out to an early lead. You remember one of those games, I think it was earlier this year, the Golden Knights, maybe that first game where they dominated the Jets. I think that was the one that they beat the Jets handily, and they had like a 4-0 lead before the game was about 10 or 12 minutes over. And then from then on, it was just nothing but window dressing at that point in time for the remainder of the game. The Jets have to be ready when the puck drops, because Vegas has been so good early in the games, Dave.
Yeah, no, there's no question, and that's going to be Connor Hellebuck. We've seen a lot of first shot, first goal for the opposition, and then he locks it down. In this instance, the Jets can't afford to have that happen. They're going to need him to be the best player. He has to be the Jets' best player. Mark Scheifele probably a close second, along with a couple of other guys. But Connor Hellebuck, if we're going to write in 2 weeks, 3 weeks time that the Jets won this series, it's going to be because Connor Hellebuck was the best player, and then the other guys all showed up and did what they needed to do. But, for the Jets, to me, this is about Connor Hellebuck. And, I want to talk about the goaltending matchup because I do wonder about the Jets' familiarity with Laurent Brossoit and how much that will play into their benefit. The Jets
It can only be an advantage, Dave, right? Like there's no way that's, I mean, you could look at it from both sides, I guess, and say that he knows the tendencies of some of the Jets shooters.
Absolutely.
But to me, it's more of an advantage for the Jets than the Golden Knights.
No, I agree. And again, like, it's funny because I remember I was watching the Sabres Habs game, and it was that shootout game. I was watching the whole thing, so people don't wonder if I was feeling okay watching that game. But it happened to go to a shootout, and it was like Eric Comrie versus Johnny Kovacevic, and it was funny because the announcer, who obviously didn't know the history, was like, well, it's, Comrie obviously won't have the book on him. I'm like, won't have the book on him? Of course he has the book on him. They have the book on each other. But, it was an interesting duel. And I just think that it will be, like I said, these guys spent a lot of years together. And the Jets, know, like Wade Flaherty knows everything about Laurent Brossoit. I mean, obviously with a new goalie coach that you pick up new techniques and new tendencies, but you still have Adam Francilla, right? Who's the guy that they both use in BC to work with in the summer. So there is a lot of things that is same agent. Yeah. Ray Petkow at Steinbach. Yeah. So, it to me, that is going to be one of the most fascinating things about this whole series is going to be the student versus the master, protege, whatever you want to call it, battle. And I do wonder how the Jets, knowing Brossoit, and you're right, Ezzy, it plays both ways. Brossoit has faced these guys. He knows where they're like to go. But, that to me will be something very interesting. And it's just another sort of additional piece of fodder to be discussed throughout the course of this series.
Hellebuck versus Brossoit, boys. Sorry, Drew, just going to quickly say, and if Brossoit falters, and Drew made this point earlier, Brossoit was completely dominant down the stretch, right? And he's been good because he obviously hasn't played a ton of games, started a ton of games, because he was playing more so in the AHL this year, right?
Yeah.
But I think what's kind of a side, a plot line is if Brossoit struggles, who goes in next? Is it Jonathan Quick? Like, does Bruce Cassidy turn to Jonathan Quick, or is Logan Thompson, who was the starting goalie earlier in the season for the first half, do they go to Logan Thompson? That's kind of another scenario because we know that it's Hellebuck or die, right? Like, there's no David Riddick isn't coming in unless Hellebuck is injured in the series, right? So that's kind of a subplot to this, is that who do the Golden Knights turn to in net if Brossoit falters?
Well, and that goes back to the old adage that if you have two number one goaltenders, that really means you have zero number one goaltenders. Which is look.
Don't tell the Bruins that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think that necessarily.
Don't tell the Sway man that.
That doesn't necessarily apply as much as it used to. But no, I mean, look, the Bruins have Linus Ullmark. He's going to be their number one. He's their number one goaltender. Jeremy Swayman has been tremendous for them. But Ullmark is going to be their guy. There's no question about it. But
what is this, Bruins lunch?
Well, no, we're not going to be talking about the Bruins, but Laurent Brossoit is a fascinating subplot. Like you guys said, this is a guy who's really never had any playoff experience to speak of, who's come out of nowhere this year. His one playoff experience came, he must have been in 2016-17. He gave up 2 goals on 8 shots as a member of the Oilers. So he definitely came in mop-up duty in a game there in the playoffs. But, to all of a sudden step up, and he's going to have to go up against a Winnipeg Jets team that he's familiar with, has both his advantages for him and that he might know some of the players' tendencies. And then at the flip side, the players themselves, might know some of his tendencies and try and take advantage of it. So many layers, so many storylines to this series, and that's why I think it's going to be such a fascinating series. Dave, I'm not going to ask Ezzy because he blurted it out earlier, but maybe I'll give him an opportunity to expand on his thoughts to that effect. But I'll start with you. Your prediction, your thoughts on how this is going to play out over the next fortnight.
Well, I think it is going to be.
He's going to play Fortnite while he's giving his answer. I think that's.
No, I don't play Fortnite anymore. I used to though. Not too bad. Couple of wins, not a big deal. But I think I'm inclined to go with Connor Hellebuck. I think there's a fire in Connor Hellebuck. I think there's a recognition that this is the last chance for romance for this group, and I think Connor Hellebuck wants to. I maybe I'm wrong because we don't. I mean, I've been in the room more in the last this year than I have in a long time, but. There just seems to be a fire in his belly. There seems to be a us against the world mentality. Remember the Jets, the Jets team. I don't think they like having the handle of favorite. I think the Jets like an underdog.
Us against the world
mentality. So to me, I think that they've adopted that. They like it when nobody's picking them in the series. They're probably hating the fact that the folks are saying it's a toss up. And I mean, you see it. You saw it in Nate Schmidt's interviews where he's like, perfect. If everybody's counting us out, perfect. That's fine. We'll prove you wrong. And I think that that's what this mentality of this group is. And look, Vegas is a fantastic team. So we've spent, the greater part of 2 hours talking about both teams and their successes and their weaknesses. So we know that these teams are not perfect by any stretch, but they have a lot of good things going for them. It's a long way of answering your question, Drew. I could have just gone very succinct like Ezzy did.
I like it.
But I'm going to go Jets in 7.
Jets in 7 is what Dave M says. Ezzy, you said Jets in 6. Do you want to?
Of course, someone did remind me recently that my Calgary making the Stanley Cup final prediction wasn't such a good one. Although they tried to say that I predicted the Flames would win. I said actually I had the Hurricanes. So boo on you. And then I referenced when nobody else was picking the Dallas Stars to make the finals. I picked the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, well, I picked the Islanders to win the Stanley Cup last year, and they missed the playoffs. So I will say, though, that they finished the season strong and almost made the playoffs. And then, obviously, they did make the playoffs this year. So I've had some pretty bad predictions. See 2012 when I picked Todd Richards to win the Jack Adams, and he was fired a week later. So it doesn't get any worse than that, guys. The Blue Jackets, did turn it around a few years later, but obviously I was a little bit early. But I'll keep this quick here because we got Eric Duhatschek coming up in about 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But the main reason why I'm picking the Jets in 6 is Connor Hellebuck, the way he's playing. And I think especially if the Jets can steal game 1 and then the Golden Knights are in a position where they have to win 4 of 6 games to win the series. You could say that about any series here, but I think especially, the Jets being a pretty big underdog or a significant underdog, I think, stealing a game, in Vegas is paramount. I mean, they have to do that. They can't win the series if they lose the first 2 games. It's too hard. But also because I don't think Mark Stone is going to be necessarily an impact early on in the series, right? Like it's not a guarantee he's going to play. So I think the forward depth is a wash, especially now that the Jets have moved Scheifele to the wing and Niederreiter's on that third line. I mean, this is the best the top 9 has looked. I mean, the fourth line, has been pretty consistent with guys like Kevin Stenlund and Saku Manalainen, right? So I think the Jets, don't really have a disadvantage when it comes to the forward lines. And even though the Golden Knights, have more talent on defense, the Jets have got a ton of offense from the back end, led by Josh Morrissey. Dylan DeMello's another guy who, has had a career year. Brendan Dillon, right? So I'm picking the Jets in 6, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to 7 games at all.
There you go. So Dave and Ezzy are on the Jets wagon saying that they think they're going to win the series. Vicious knows me a little bit too well. I think the Jets are going to make this a very competitive series. I don't think the Jets are going to get blown out, which is not what I believed, a few weeks ago, a month ago. I thought the Jets would be done in 3. I do think the Jets are going to make this a very interesting series, but I think ultimately they're going to fall short. I have Vegas winning this in 7. I do think it's going to go the entirety. I think it's going to go the length of the series, but I do think that ultimately at the end of it all, the Vegas Golden Knights are going to emerge as the victors in this series. Yes, Dave,
thank you, Buzz Killington.
No, yeah. I'm being Buzz Honesty.
That's fine.
I like that. Buzz Honesty. That was good, Drew.
Well, I will say, not only are you hearing what our predictions are, we want you to make your predictions. I've set up a poll in the chat. So if you want to, I was lazy. I just went Jets in 6, Jets in 7, Golden Knights in 6, Golden Knights in 7. I don't believe in 4 and 5 because none of us think it's going to happen, which means, of course, it's going to be Jets in 5. But the reality is just give us a vote. Let us know which way you're swaying, and we'll reveal that when we finish our chat with Eric Duhatschek.
That we will. And we also have a bracket challenge set up. Bailey can tweet out the link or send out the link in the chat if she wants to copy and paste it there. But when we come back, Eric Duhatschek of The Athletic joins us for more playoff talk. Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
We're into overtime on this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Normally we sign off now, but when we have an opportunity to welcome a guest, the status of our good friend Eric DeHatchick, we're willing to go lengthier. We're willing to go into overtime to talk about the playoffs with Eric. You know Eric from his great work, of course, with theathletic.com. Eric, good to see you. How are things?
Yeah, good. Like you guys, very excited about what we might see in this year's playoffs. I've been doing what you've been doing most of the morning and a lot of yesterday, assembling my panel of the anonymous coach and scout and executive that I always call at this time of year for predictions. And the only problem with talking to longtime NHL people, they don't like picking upsets. You know, I'm sitting there thinking, wow. You know, I think we're going to have 8 favorites going through, but they're always willing to make the argument for, say, Florida over Boston. And then when it comes time to make a pick, it's like, Boston in 5. Oh, okay.
That's good. They talk about why it could happen, and then they say why it won't happen.
Well, exactly. You've nailed it there.
Eric, we've spent the last 2+ hours talking about the Jets and the Golden Knights because, of course, that is the focus of everyone here in Winnipeg and those of us who are tuning in from Vegas as well, listening to our perspective. From your perspective, looking at these two teams, I want to start with that series because I'm always interested in what you're seeing when you look at this Jets team that has been so topsy-turvy all year round, and then this Golden Knights team that has been battled through the injury bug to finish atop the Pacific Division. When you look at that first round series, what is your breakdown? What are your eyes and brain telling you about the Jets and the Golden Knights?
Well, it's okay. I'll start with Vegas because the one thing that I'm completely impressed with what they've accomplished. When you think about the adversity they've had, you know, trying to sort out the goaltending, beginning from, you know, when Robin Lehner, it was clear that he wasn't going to be able to start the season and the various options that they've tried. And it's just been patch and plug. And very rarely does patch and plug work at such an important position. And yet they've managed to, you know, they won a very, very tough division, a very competitive division with patch and plug goaltending. You know, key injuries on the blue line, important players missing up front. I mean, it's admirable. And in some ways, like, I don't even understand it. I watch them play a lot and, you know, and I'm looking at, like, you know, they're getting so much out of Michael Amadio and, you know, players that, you know, that are borderline NHLers or have been up until this stage of the career. So on paper, it looks pretty close, and yet there's an intangible to this Vegas team. It almost seems as if after last year's disappointment, they sat down at the end of the year and said, okay, we're better than this, and we need to prove to people that we're better than this. And then they demonstrated that after 82 games. I mean, they're physical. They're deep on the blue line, and I think the biggest question mark is the one that I'm sure everyone has talked about. What version of Jack Eichel will emerge? Here's a guy that's hungry for playoff success that hasn't had any to this point in his career, and it could be a coming out party for Jack Eichel. And if it is a coming out party for Jack Eichel, and if he performs at the level of his draft pedigree and at the level that we've seen at times this year from him, where he does look like an elite level player, then I think that tips the scales in favor of Vegas. But this is one where a lot of it depends on which version of the Winnipeg Jets we're going to see. Is it that team that was really good in the first half? You know me, I've always liked their team on paper. Every time I come on this podcast, I tell you that I like their forward depth. I think their defense is better than people give it credit for, and they have an established all-star goaltender, which not everybody in the West has. And so, but that team that was playing, before they sort of went on this little surge, looked disinterested, and they were half a step behind everybody all the time. So I don't think you'll see that version in the playoffs. I think that what they accomplished in the last couple or 3 weeks of the season it has them trending in the right direction. The playoffs should bring out the best in all of those players. And so this is another exercise I do. I go man by man down the roster, because sometimes, like if you're only trying to evaluate the big picture, like who's the 7th best forward on each team? Who's the 13th best forward on each team? Who's the 4th best defenseman? If you go man by man down those rosters, Winnipeg has the edge. They're just better in more of those 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2. So to me, it's a coin flip. But the one reason that and I'm not making picks, but I would probably pick Vegas in this series is simply because they have become a little bit like what they were in the first year. So why did Vegas succeed as that expansion team? They were better than the sum of the individual parts, right? I mean, they took all these expansion pieces, and all of a sudden, they get it together and they win the division, and they go all the way to the Stanley Cup final, and then they end up losing to Washington. And on paper, it was like, I don't know, I can't figure it out. But they were better than the sum of the individual parts, which I think they are again. And at different times this year, Winnipeg has been worse than the sum of their individual parts. So like when I'm sort of weighing and balancing and trying to see which way I tilt to the Vegas side.
And Eric, we want to get we want to talk about, some of the other series. Obviously, the Edmonton Oilers, we're pushing the Golden Knights for first in the division and first in the Western Conference. And we want to get your take. I think you'd agree that the Oilers are one of the most dangerous teams in the Western Conference right now, winning their last 9 and everything like that. But just one more question on the Jets Golden Knights series. We obviously spent a good part of today's show talking about the series. And for me, the one thing that I would give the Golden Knights a huge edge in the series, if Mark Stone had played a little bit towards the end of the regular season, and we knew that he was fully healthy, but there's a big question mark whether Mark Stone's even going to play in game 1. And I think you'd agree, if Stone is healthy, I mean, he's one of the best right wingers in the entire game. And I think he would have he would sway the favor in terms of Golden Knights big time if he's able to play significant games in this series.
Well, I would agree with that, but I would also say that, once a player has been out of the lineup for that period of time, it takes usually a game or two to get up to NHL speed. And then, the playoffs are played at another level. So, of course, I mean, Mark Stone, if he's healthy, is usually in the conversation for best defensive forward in the National Hockey League. He's got a great stick, the way he, comes back on the back check and strips the puck and turns the play the other way. They've been missing that. They've been missing that. But it is really hard to do what, say, Patrick Kane did a few years back, where he, missed all of that time and then came back in the playoffs and bingo, right off the hop was excellent. I mean, Kucherov did the same thing. I just think that the way Stone plays, it will take him a little bit longer to get up to speed. So I think he is a valuable piece for them as the playoffs progress, but I'm not sure how much of an impact he would necessarily have right off the bat.
Eric Dehachik, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning, talking about the rest of the playoff series after we spent the 2+ hours talking about the Winnipeg Jets and the Vegas Golden Knights.
Well, Ken Holland may win GM of the year just for acquiring Matthias Ekholm. That looks like just the greatest trade in the history of trade deadline acquisitions right now, Eric, because those Edmonton Oilers are fearsome. And I know a lot of Jets fans were happy, despite the fact that they swept Edmonton a few years back. We're happy to allow the LA Kings to potentially soften the Oilers up a little bit. But this Edmonton team, aside from the obvious Draisaitl and McDavid, they've got Evander Kane. They've got probably, as he's been calling it, the quietest 100-point season of all time in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And Stuart Skinner looks like he's emerged as a number one goaltender. So what are you seeing from these Oilers? And do you think there's any chance that LA has in this series? I mean, because LA's been shown they were one of the best teams after the trade deadline as well.
Yeah. Well, so I do think Edmonton is the favorite in the West. I would even rank them ahead of Colorado right now. For all the reasons that you just cited, they managed to integrate those trade deadline acquisitions and they filled a need. So sometimes I look at the way general managers act at the trade deadline, and sometimes you're puzzled because it's like, okay, why did they go out and get that guy? They have that already. But Edmonton filled two specific needs. One for that stay at home Adam Larson kind of a defenseman that they haven't had since Larson left to go to Seattle in the expansion draft, and they were clearly missing that. So he's come in and been an instant impact player for them, and I think that Bukestad coming in from Arizona just further deepened that bottom group. So if you go back and look at last year's preview when we were talking about Edmonton, it was, do they have the depth around Draisaitl and McDavid? And I would say the answer right now is yes. I look at their top 5 forwards, and I include the 3 that you mentioned, plus Hyman and Evander Kane, and they're all impactful players. And then Yamamoto's been better the last 3 weeks. I thought he was a bit erratic prior to that, but they're just better 1 to 12 now than they were a year ago. Ekholm adds a dimension that they didn't have. And the one thing that surprised me, I mean, you talk about the work that Holland did. It was a risk moving Tyson Barrie in that deal, because Tyson Barrie was the quarterback of a power play that was the best in NHL history. And the fact that they were able to so smoothly transition away from Barrie and promote Bouchard from QB2 to QB1 and continue to perform at that level, I think was really, really extraordinary and important. And you hit on the wild card, which is that, if you look at last year's Edmonton LA series, which I covered, and by the way, was frantically entertaining because LA, LA, won that first game and just put them on notice that they weren't going away quietly. The goaltending has been completely changed on both sides, right? So it was Mike Smith and Koskinen on the Edmonton side, and it was Quick and Cal Peterson on the other side, and poof, all 4 are gone. So Skinner has, obviously 29 wins, one more than Grant Fuhr had in his rookie season. He's been exceptional, but, and rookie goalies in the playoffs sometimes are great, and sometimes the moment gets to them. So we'll have to see how that goes. I do think that Korpisalo is an important upgrade for the Kings goaltending, which hadn't been good up until that point. And then, their equivalent to the Ekholm trade was bringing in Gavrikov from Columbus. Same exact philosophy, right? They needed help on the left side, and they needed a little bit more size and grit, and Gavrikov has given them that. And then the only other thing I would say, and this is more based on, again, last year's series, is that, as McDavid and Draisaitl, fantastic, right? I mean, 2 points a game, probably do that again this playoff, but they'll have to go head to head against Kopitar and Danault, and those are experienced, really good defensive players. So, there are some matchups where McDavid and Draisaitl would just roll over the teams, but I think that LA has the defensive awareness at the center ice position to at least make it a little bit more difficult for them. I mean, I'm picking Edmonton to come out of the Western Conference, but I do think that that LA, they're battlers, and they have a good structure. I really like the coaching staff there, Todd McClellan and Trent Yanni, and the rest of that crew. They're smart, good game planning coaches, and so I think it'll be another fantastic series.
Eric, there's one team that's not getting talked about at all from my perspective. They have what I would describe as a top 10 goalie. They have a top 10 goal scorer, in Jason Robertson. Of course, I'm talking about the Dallas Stars. They have a number of guys who are almost point-to-game players. They have a horse on the back end in Miro Heiskanen. Why is nobody talking about the Dallas Stars? Because I think that they are in my books, they might be the second best team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question, and when I sat down there and put teams on paper, again, that's the exercise I do. I put 3 teams that I thought could emerge from the West: Edmonton, obviously, Colorado, obviously, and Dallas was the other team that I put there. And that was, when I started doing this exercise, it wasn't really clear whether Dallas would win the Central, or in the particular case, after Colorado won on Friday night, they've slipped back into that 2 slot, and now they've got Minnesota. But no, I agree with you. I think that part of the reason that no one's talking about them is because you don't really get excited about a team that has that kind of. There's no identity, I guess, right? So, you think about Edmonton and you think about the way McDavid drives the offense. You think about Colorado and the way McKinnon does, and the player that drives Dallas right now is Jason Robertson, who's just really good, right? Like he just 200-foot player, great hands around the net. I mean, he should be on everybody's MVP ballot, because we get to vote for 5 players, and then you've got kind of an older Joe Pavelski who hit a flat spot at one point in the season, Rupe Hintz. We always do that thing about the most underrated player in the NHL. I think it's time to update that, because all of the players we used to talk about, the Barkovs and so on, are no longer underrated. And so now you can move Rupe Hintz into that, former spot occupied by Barkov. Way better player than a lot of people realize. And then, Jamie Benn had a bounce back year. Tyler Seguin, I don't think is ever going to be the player that he once was because of all of those injuries. So, and it does, the depth kind of falls off a little bit after that. Wyatt Johnson had a real good rookie year, but once you get past the name guys, then there's a whole bunch of anonymous pluggers who just contribute and play hard. So another team that I would say is that is better than the sum of the individual parts, and they have the goaltending, right? I mean, Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuck are arguably the 2 best goaltenders in the Western Conference, and we've all been around long enough to know that if Ottinger gets hot, which he did. I remember last year against Calgary. I mean, he practically stole that series. Dallas really had no business being in that series against Calgary, and yet it went right down to the wire because Ottinger was fantastic. So Ottinger playing at the level he did at last year's playoffs, they can beat anybody. I agree.
Especially if Kiviranta is going to score 5 goals like he did during that bubble year. That came out of nowhere, right? So, I think Dallas and Minnesota.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, he's a guy that's, I was looking at the lines, and he's on the 4th line, and he's probably playing, 8 or 9 minutes a night. So, if you get one of those magical, Dave Lowry kind of playoffs, you never know, right? You never know. So.
Yeah, and just to continue the theme, we're talking about the Oilers, maybe a little Fernando Pisani back in 2006, if you want to go way back. But Eric,
or Chris Kontos, if you really want to go back.
Okay, yeah, Chris Kontos. We actually had Chris Kontos on the Illegal Curve hockey show. I think it was to talk about, he played in the Olympics back in the day for Team Canada. Was that why we had him on, Drew? I think it was because of that. But I do remember we had Chris Kontos on. So that was an excellent reference. Or John Drews. That was the other guy I was thinking about. If
John
you want to talk
Drews,
about Jets
another guy,
1.0, right?
Yeah.
I know Drew and Dave will appreciate that one, but just switching over to the East, because I mean, obviously Toronto, Tampa Bay, I mean, is deservedly so going to get the headlines because of the moves Toronto made. Ryan O'Reilly being at the top of that list, and the fact that the Leafs haven't got past the first round in about 30 years here. But the series I wanted to ask you was about Carolina Islanders, because the Carolina Hurricanes are a team that I picked to go to the Stanley Cup final at the beginning of the year, which means absolutely nothing because my predictions are horrible. But when you look at the Hurricanes, right, like Andrei Svechnikov, that injury is obviously detrimental. Max Pacioretty, but I still look at that Hurricanes team, and it might be higher than them, but they were still a 113-point team, even without those players, right? Svechnikov obviously missed less time than Pacioretty, but I thought that the matchup for the Hurricanes is maybe the worst matchup that you could get even though the Islanders struggled a little bit down the stretch. But we know Matt Barzal is going to be good to go. What is kind of your assessment of that series? I still would pick the Hurricanes if I was forced to make a pick, but I feel like the Islanders are not going to be an easy out for the Hurricanes.
No, well, I agree, and again, I'm not making picks, but if I was, that would be my one upset special. I look at the wild card teams, and to me, the most dangerous one is New York, and I also think this is a really favorable matchup because the strength of Carolina is its structure, but that's also the strength of the Islanders, their structure, and so to me, it's an absolute coin flip, and the one thing, I mean. I love the Islanders goaltending way more than I like Carolina's. Sorokin has had a year where he's in the Vezina Trophy conversation. Freddie Anderson has been hurt and he's been up and down. It would drive me crazy if I was a coach or a manager because you just never know from night to night which version of Anderson you get. Ranta has been an excellent backup for him this year. I had him on my fantasy team for a while. Like he would come in and get wins and get shutouts, but can you really ride Ranta? If Anderson falters, and then last year they were down to their third choice, who also when Preston service Kochetkov was very good. So, but I don't like the uncertainty of their goaltending going into this playoff against an Islander team that has Sorokin there. Now, I like Carolina's defense way more than I like the Islanders' defense, and I think that's where they have the biggest edge. But up front, with Svechnikov out of the mix, and as you say, Barzal coming back in, Horvat is a guy that they acquired because they thought they could win with him in the playoffs. Brock Nelson, I would put him right there with Rupe Hintz on my list of appreciated NHL players. He had a fantastic season, and then you've got heavy players like Anders Lee. I mean, these are the playoffs, and heavy player. I had somebody tell me the other day. He said, "Do you remember what the old time GMs used to say?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "At this time of year, big players squish little players." And I laughed. I thought that if that was true in the 80s, it's probably still true now. And I like the size of the Islanders and the heaviness of their game. So to me, that's a pick 'em, and I think that the Islanders have a chance there.
Eric, I was going to ask about the Leafs Lightning series, but I really just want to know which e-bug do you think is going to be in net to defeat the Lightning for the Leafs? I'm just kidding. But realistically, what do you think in terms of that series? Because it seems like Toronto is ready to finally get over that hump and finally get past the Lightning for the first time in the playoffs.
Okay, so all of my panel have all said the same thing, and I'm there trying to push back a little bit as an interviewer. And I said, well, okay, so but Tampa, they played 12 playoff series in the last 3 years, and the answer was, well, maybe they're running out of gas. And I said, well, that's a reason for them not to go 4 rounds in the playoffs, but it's not a reason for them not to win 1 round of the playoffs. And so. I mean, last year, I think the reason that people are picking Toronto is because Toronto really gave Tampa a great series last year, and it was so close, and Toronto is better. So if Toronto is better and the Island and the Lightning are slightly worse, which they are, because I don't think they have the horses on defense that they had a year ago, then that should tilt the scales in favor of Toronto. Plus, Toronto was just a better regular season team. But I hate going against a team with a Stanley Cup pedigree because the game changes and it's just it's largely the pressure, really. So those players in Toronto will be facing an unbelievable weight going into this this playoff. I think it really helps Tampa to start on the road because they're going in there trying to win 1 of 2, and then if it starts to get down to 1-1, 2-2, 3-3 like it did last year, well, Tampa went into Toronto and won Game 7 last year, and so I'm just not prepared to write Tampa off. I mean, Kucherov is healthy. Point has had an outstanding season. Stamkos, I don't think has duplicated what he did a year ago. Vasilevsky's not nearly the goaltender that he was when, a year, 2 years ago, when we could clearly say he was the best goalie in the NHL and everybody else is competing for number 2. But I think he's capable of raising the level of his play. And Hedman hasn't had a great year. And I'm not even sure if he'll start on the first power play because Sergachev has been so good. I think, again, it'll be fascinating to watch. It will be back and forth. And I'm reluctant to pick against Tampa Bay, I guess is the best thing I'm going to say right now.
Probably the hardest series to predict, right?
Well, yeah, and yet, as I say, everybody I talk to is picking Toronto. Like, I have not heard one person, except me, raise my hand and say, "Well, what about Tampa?" They've got
all they've done is won 2 Stanley Cups and go to the final 3 years in a row, right?
Exactly. I can't get my head around the fact that people are so universally like if it was 50% on Toronto and 50% on Tampa, that would be fine, because I think it's kind of one of those pick 'em series. But that is not it. Everybody I talk to is saying this is Toronto's year, and it could be. In some ways, well, I'll put it this way. You guys are based in Winnipeg. I'm based in Calgary. No Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since 1993. If Edmonton were to come out of the West and Toronto were to come out of the East, what do you think that would do for the country? I mean, that would be fun. That would be fun.
Eric, that would be the two most obnoxious fan bases going at each other. Let me tell you, there'd be a level of toxicity on the internet that would be unmatched.
Yeah.
Okay,
but don't go on Twitter if that happens.
Okay, but see, that's the thing. So I'm not on social media very often, right? So I only care about it from the pure perspective of watching hockey. So now you got Connor McDavid and Draisaitl on the one hand, and you've got Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner on the other, and somebody is going to win the Stanley Cup after a 30-year drought. It's 30 years, right, since Montreal won. As someone that enjoys watching hockey and doesn't get into Twitter fights with people, I would be okay with that. I would like that.
Think about the void in your life, Eric. Not fighting with random strangers you've never met. Think about how what you're missing out on. Last question to you. I don't think we've mentioned their name yet in this interview, or if we have, it's only been in passing. Why can any of these teams in the East beat the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, well, no, it's a great question. I did an essay about 3 years ago before the Tampa 2019 playoffs, and Tampa had a similar kind of a year. I think they won 62 games. They were the heavy odds-on favorite, and I talked to Scotty Bowman because in my research I found that Scotty Bowman won all those Stanley Cups, but he often won them with teams that had 96 points or 101 points, and the best teams he had, especially in Detroit, didn't win. They couldn't get it done, and so I think Boston is in the same. And then of course Tampa lost to Columbus, and then a whole bunch of people on the one side were mad at me because they thought that I jinxed Tampa, and then a whole bunch of other people were thought, hey, like the crystal ball was pretty good that year. So I'm not prepared to predict that, but I would like to at least open the possibility that when you go coast to coast the way Boston did, takes a lot of energy out of your team. They really never hit a flat patch, and that's what happened with Tampa. They had a bad week, and they were out very, very quickly. So you've got a Florida Panthers team waiting for them there. A year ago, Florida were the President's Trophy champions. They had the best team. They didn't have much of a playoff history, but they looked really, really good, and they made all the right moves at the trade deadline. And they couldn't get it done. So that is my argument, that there is, on paper, they should be favored in every series, but the game's not played on paper. Depth, which they have coming out of their whatever, it really helps you the further you go along the path. But, Florida's a dangerous lurker. If they get past Florida, Tampa and Toronto are really, really good teams. And then, who knows who comes out of the Central. So it's step by step by step, and lots of things have to go right for you. But on paper, with the depth they have in goal, 7 deep on the blue line, bringing in Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall healthy again, they're really good. They're really good. And once in a while, the best team wins. But a lot of times in the National Hockey League, it doesn't. And so that's the best that I can do for that.
Eric Tehachik covers the NHL for theathletic.com. He's one of our favorite guests. Eric, we always appreciate your time. We always appreciate your insight. It's going to be a hell of a first round, and it's only going to get better from there. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
All right, my pleasure.
Take care, Eric.
Thanks so much, Eric.
There he goes. Our good friend Eric Tehachik joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
This is like old times.
Yes, we went into overtime on this Saturday morning, and my kids were wondering what was going on because I'm usually upstairs by now, and that's
making pancakes.
Yeah, no, we already had French toast for breakfast. We have breakfast before the show, Dave. It's almost lunchtime. Come on, get with the routine.
If you're having French toast in France, is it just toast?
And
like
on
when I
that
was in
note-
China, when I was in China, I was just eating food.
Yes, and on that
Well-
note, we say a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the Saturday show, the post-game show, and the website a possibility. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to Murata Tesh. Big thanks to Eric Dehachik for joining us. In case you missed any of the interviews or any of the extensive preview we did on the Jets and the Golden Knights, it's available for immediate replay on YouTube, and the podcast will be up very shortly thereafter. Be sure to smash the like button on our YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube page, and of course, leave us feedback here, there, and everywhere, especially on iTunes as well. We always love to hear what you think of the program.
Drew, do we want to let people know what the final poll numbers were?
Sure, go
I'm
quickly.
going to end
there,
the poll
Dave.
right now.
Okay.
Jets in 6, crowd had 54%. Actually, I ended it and then I lost it. Jets in 6, crowd 54%. Jets in 7, crowd 23%. Golden Knights in 6, 20%. And Drew, I believe you had Golden Knights in 7.
Yeah.
Drew, we've always said this about you. You're a 1%er.
There you go. Exactly. I'm in the top 1% of wealth and of opinions when it comes to hockey. Big thanks to everyone for joining us. Reminder, Tuesday night, the Illegal Curve post-game show right after the Jets and the Golden Knights.
Drew, by the way, the Moose playoff dates have been revealed, so you might want to let the folks know they want it. Can't go to Jets playoff games.
Friday, Sunday next week.
Friday, Sunday. It's going to be a busy Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Woo!
Exactly. Friday, so the third, yeah. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday for Jets and Moose playoff games in downtown Winnipeg. Be sure to keep it locked to all of our social media at Illegal Curve. Be sure to keep it locked to illegalcurve.com. All the latest news, everything to do with the playoffs, and any sort of information about an Illegal Curve live broadcast. We'll bring it to you just as soon as we can. Thank you, Spency. I appreciate the insult.
Read it for the podcast, Drew. Read it for the podcast.
Yeah, Spency says similar results to the IC personality popularity poll. Drew got 1% there as well. Thank you for that, Spency. I appreciate the love. We appreciate the love from everyone who's joined us this morning.
Spency.
We'll see you all again soon. We'll see you Tuesday night. Thanks everyone for joining us. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.